absolutely seamless. Now, what early buff. The reason I'm early is because I didn't want Toller to have to sit around while I do all this shit. So let's get some light on. Let's get me a little bit nearer. Toller won't be showing his face because he's cleverly remained anonymous in a world where you need to. But let me just get my Logitech camera settings app open, and I will come at you live and direct from Phnom Penh in Cambodia. Welcome. I'm looking forward to this one. I just hope I can maintain a line of thought that lasts longer than 4 seconds, because that's always handy when you're in conversation. Bam. Bam. Maybe that's as near as I can get. Oh, that's too near, isn't it? Ridiculous. Hello. First thing this morning, woke up, girlfriend's laying next to me, which is a good place for your girlfriend to be when you wake up in the morning. And I had my eyes open first, and she can, it's weird, isn't it? Those strange sort of linguistic, non-verbal language that goes on between lovers in bed, you know. And so she's obviously sort of felt the sort of movements I do as I'm waking up, and you know, so as soon as I opened my eyes, about 2 seconds later she opened her. What? About 2 seconds later she opened her eyes. Right, so literally this, me, and then her. She went, "You look tired." You look tired. I am tired. I fucking work my arse off. But first thing in the morning, yeah, do look tired, yeah. Afternoon, Raymond. Much love to all. Thanks for the early VAR. Let me sort out the lights. Excuse me. Let me sort out the light situation. There's a little bit, but we can do better than that, I'm sure. Yeah, this is what I didn't want Toller to have to sit through, because it's just rubbish. I was contemplating not showing my face. Why? What? So you couldn't see me? There is a sort of, when one person shows their face and the other doesn't, there is a, I don't know what the word would be. Not very good when you're trying to explain something. There is a slight adjustment to the light. There you go. Oh, fucking hell, that's proper migraine setting. There is a slight adjustment to the dynamic, but I thought, you know, a bit of eye candy for the ladies, you know. Exactly that, Emma. Exactly that. I don't know whether that's in reference to what I was saying. 120 people in. The boy Rags is pulling them all in. Hello, Sensen. Good to see you. Listening to you the other night. Raymond, thanks for that donation. The Toller is in the digital green room. I can see him down here. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Because I've got a guest on, unless I'm talking, I will not be interrupting him with bombastic shouts of Vart. Also, Varts will get priority asking Toller questions because I'm a whore. So without further ado, let's get the lad on. I'm going to try not to wear my headphones. That will come down to Toller telling me. I feel a little bit familiar calling him Toller. Should I call him the Ayatollah every time? I'll ask him. He's the bloke to ask. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, look. Hello, mate.
How you doing? You all right?
I am not all right.
No?
No. It's midnight here. Right. It's been a hard-working day. It's been a lot of hard work and a lot of dealing with other people's mistakes.
Weren't these the lyrics that John Lennon was going to go with for Hard Day's Night until Brian Epstein got hold of it? Those are the ones.
There you go. Yeah. I haven't got any music for your introduction.
Oh, no. Well, it's nice for me just to sort of be the other side of the bit of getting introduced, really. You know, somebody that starts a stream, does a bit of housekeeping, and then brings somebody in, because I do it the same way, you know. So
it's lovely, isn't it? It's lovely. I'm envious of your position.
But I mean, as is customary in my life, unfortunately, I turned up earlier than I should. That doesn't the double entendre doesn't actually work when I put it like that. So that's fallen flat, hasn't it? But no, I was a couple of minutes earlier than I was meant to be. There you go, that works.
You did
Yeah.
turn up early. I see you sent me some private chats.
Because I expected a load of grief with StreamYard, but fortunately it was all right. So it did bewilder me by asking me to sign in via Google, but I thought, well, whatever. They know who I am.
Peculiar situation. I have. Oh, what's happened there? Maybe you can't see that. I have better internet out here, faster, and that's been tested, not just guessing, than I did living in the centre of London, England.
I can believe that. My internet for my stream last night was shocking. So yeah, it was awful. I was roboting like Peter Crouch in 2006.
But you just heard me say that. I won't interrupt you, but I will interrupt myself when people throw a couple of quid at me. Nice one, Packer. He's off to the boozer. He's paid me to say he's going. Hello, Toller. I'll watch it back later. Have a good one. See you all later, Scrubs. Nice one, Packer. Have a good time. Your missus is free to use your account there. Lovely wife he's got, Toller.
All right, yeah. Not many of them about anymore.
You know what? And you're so right. And she is beautiful looking, and she's a wonder. She comes on here as a guest when we do a call in.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
I love her.
Yeah, maybe a bit too much from the sounds of it.
Yeah, obviously. It started off as quite a sort of a nice sort of joke. And look, he's flirting with what? He's flirting with a guest's wife, but now he is in love with her. She's so delicious. I even went back and looked at the thumbnail that I put her on for no reason, just so that I could add an excuse to look at her a lot while I cut round it,
Oh, blimey.
Yeah, there's a problem there. Let's go back to you relaxing. For me, it's not only nice to be relaxing on the other side of things because you're on the other side of things, but also because I will tend not to have my face showing when I'm, on the other side of things.
Yeah.
Much different, isn't it? When you can pick your nose.
Exactly. Yeah. You can pull faces when the guest joke falls flat and whatever. So I don't know how I cope with that, but my rationale for not face doxing was always, I don't want the women going bloody mental, do I? So, it'd be like Beatlemania all over again because, it would just things would have got out of control. The dissident right doesn't need that. Bloody hell, we got enough problems.
I think you're currently, if I can get this out quick enough, you're one Beatle reference a minute at the moment.
I reckon, yeah, and I'm not a big Beatles enjoyer either, which is what's strange about it. I mean, the first one.
What's strange about it is that you said not a big Beatles enjoyer rather than fan.
This has become a thing. The enjoyer thing is, I don't know where this is. I mean, I'm sure I saw somebody with the username enjoyment enjoyer once. It really sort of reached me when I've got a mutual obsession with a road rage, as the Taliban that are in the chat tonight, who've got a fair overlap with the Scrubs. I've got an obsession with the road rage video from Reading in 2015, where there's a sort of fella in an old Peugeot 405 estate who gets irate with a cyclist and chases him down the street, tries to kick him off his bike, and then falls flat on his face and does a sort of forward roll into the road. But he's wearing these like proper, if you went on Wikipedia and typed in jeans, those are the jeans he's wearing. They're like just straight up stonewash, like Tesco jobs. And like this fella Stag's Head, who was sort of, we were cracking jokes about that literally like a year ago. You was calling him a Tesco jeans enjoyer, and just the suffix enjoyer just became really funny to me for everything. Like, exactly, that's what's funny about it. Why would you say enjoyer when you could just say fan? I don't know. I
think I heard you say it on the stream with I can't remember the fella's name the other night actually, and it stuck out then, or someone mentioned
Big Joe Marsh. Yeah, probably did. Yeah.
Oh, that was it. Yeah. Interesting. Anyway, I will let you finish that. But my dad's side, they were very, very sort of, cup of tea and toast on Sunday morning with marmalade and fully dressed for breakfast and all that. And really weird. But they were sort of pre-war, but in the post-war context. But if me and my brother wanted to watch the telly, which is all there was to do at her house, they expect you to sit around and read the Radio Times. And when you're like 8, that's not great. It's not great at any age. But we'd sort of say, Nan, can we put the Sweeney on? Or even something like Grange Hill. And she'd say, Oh, I don't usually look at that. Look at, as opposed
yeah,
to
yeah.
watch. Have you heard that? Have you heard
Straight.
anyone?
I don't think I have. I'll tell you what I've noticed in talking to Scots in the past, probably only the past 6 months. They don't say about living somewhere. No, he stays down in Dunfermline. Stays, like somebody stays there. You know, no, he stays down in Greenock, like really weird.
No, that is a very
It's
strange one.
bizarre. Yeah, So there you go.
Sir Grego is saying that enjoyer is a bit more sensual, and I think you're right, actually, Grego. It does doff the cap to the sins of the flesh, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It
it
really
is
does.
quite sensual and Epicurean, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Look how we're getting on, Toller. Just straight into it, aren't we?
It's what I got in a streaming. You can talk with some people. You can talk about nothing, and it's all right. It's not a bad racket, really.
That was a bit rude, though. In fairness.
Well, yeah.
It's quite nice. You can talk about nothing.
Well, I can. It's worked for me. I can't really speak for you so much, but it's worked for me. The one thing I forgot tonight was to come on and say on Suez Day. I forgot that bit, which I did when you were on my channel.
Try again.
Say on Suez Day.
I'm lost with this. Oh, you meant say, and you're going for how you pronouncing it?
Suez Day. Something like I might have misremembered it.
No, you're right, but it is something like that. Every province has a different dialect, which is why I didn't bother getting lessons. Yeah. I did get lessons, and then I came home and my girlfriend was like, well, that's how they say it in Kampong Cham, but in Kampong Chenang, they don't. So I just went, yeah, this is a waste of time. You can kind of get away with Sois Day.
Right, okay, yeah.
But what's quite sweet is bong. It's just hello bong, or just bong, which is brother. And everyone's brother. Yeah. But there is own, which is I don't think there's a logic to it, because sometimes children are own, but sometimes they're a bong, but sometimes an old man is an own. It's like Hungarian Cambodian. It doesn't seem to have an obvious kind of history of languages.
Yeah,
where did I come from? It's bizarre. Maybe someone knows. All right. Well, look, I got you on here for a few reasons. I wanted to talk to you. You've already said the dissident right. So I've moved away from that scene quite a lot. I still believe that the nation state is the way to go, as opposed to a globalist world. But in terms of being part of a group or a movement, I might be, because of some of the things I say, but I don't choose to identify it as such. What are your politics? And well, there you go. What are your politics?
Well, I mean, you've sort of hit the start of it, which is, you said you believe in the nation state. Now, take the sort of the political construct out of that, and it's just like, I just want to have a nice home. And a home isn't a very nice home when there are various sort of things going on that we see in the world now, which is to say, you think of the people. I know you've talked on these streams before in the past about like going home, and just it's quite different from the last time you were there because of waves of immigration. And in certain instances, don't get me wrong, if people coming in are particularly sort of antisocial in some way, it's a lot worse. But just the actual foreignness of foreigners in large numbers is quite an alienating thing. Now, that's just one facet of the present order, which is very alienating, and I think is very much not in the interest of sort of normal people. That you could get into the economics of it as well. I mean, something I sort of, I'm a big fan of the Woodlander, for example. He's been on my channel a couple of times, and I'd love to do what he's done, but I wouldn't trust myself to not lock my own head off whilst trying to sort of build the place. But basically it's particularly in some of the stories he told about close calls with water pressure and stuff, but all of it really arises from that, because I'm not the sort of person who in other circumstances would be that interested in politics. I'd get angry about something else. I'd get angry about sport or something, you know what I mean? I'd be a good sort of shit muncher, to be totally honest about it. But the scale of the sort of the encroachments and the impositions and the injustices, and frankly in some cases the atrocities, made me bloody angry, and that's how I ended up getting involved with this, basically. And I think the thing with that is, I'm funnily enough, and I've said this many times, I'm not, and I'm not saying this to sort of eschew or like patriotism or whatever, or even sort of national pride. I'm not. There are many people who can make jokes about this, given what everyone knows about the half Indian girlfriend and all that. I'm not like a wildly ethnocentric person. I'm not like massively kind of patriotic or whatever, but I'm very protective of my group. I'm very protective of my home. And I'm one of those sort of people where if I'm left alone, you would not know I'm there. But it's quite a thin line, and cross it, and I get very angry very quickly. And that's basically what I've been doing. What I've been doing for as long as I've had a public voice is getting very angry very quickly. But I try and temper it, because you only need so much rage understanding the problems. You don't need to keep exposing yourself to it, which is why a lot of the streams I do, they're not actually that political. And to a degree, I try to avoid it. Sometimes people will ask me questions like, what do you think of such and such a thing that's happened in Marseille? And I'm like, well, look, it's basically the same as all the other atrocities that have happened there, with some, so, well, I don't want to get too specific on your channel, jeopardize me, I won't jeopardize yours, but somebody going mad with a machete or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, we all know why it's there. It's like, yeah, these things are happening, and there's not a lot for the time being that I can do about it. And, that's not shying away from it, because you're aware of what you can do. One of the things you can do if you've got even a small audience is try and keep people sane. And one of the better ways to do that is don't overload them with rage porn when they know what the problems are and how bad it is. And unless there's an interesting and constructive angle on it, talk about something else. You might talk about music or whatever, Yeah. So that's where I've ended up,
Yeah, I think there's quite an overlap there with your stream and my stream, because you've got a community there. I see you talk to them people. They're regulars. You know them.
Yeah.
And much the same with me, actually. People occasionally will say, oh, well, what do you make of that? And I usually say there's other people who know more about it talking about that elsewhere. And I just want to give something positive, and it's been quite organic, but I will end up talking about my channel, and I don't want to do that because I do that for 2 hours every day. You mentioned ethno-nationalism. Is that something you'd want for the UK, and if so, is that something you think that's likely to happen?
I don't think it's likely to happen in the foreseeable future, clearly. No, I think very sort of seismic things would have to happen around the world. Basically, kind of integrity in terms of ethnicity and race it generally makes for better societies. You would simplify too much, I think, if you said, oh, okay, like, any degree of foreigners, regardless of what they are going to sort of, it's going to present the same challenges. That's not the case. It varies depending on who the people are. Do you know what I mean? One of the most sort of, I'm not a great man for originality. One of the most original or sort of interesting things I've probably ever said about this is, and this will sound a bit kind of hyper neoliberal, and I'm generally not that way as much as I like getting a takeaway or whatever. But if I go into London, which I don't do very often, it is horrendous. But in some ways, going to say Birmingham or Bradford would bother me more, or Leicester, because the demographics are almost as bad. It's almost as alienating for everybody there, but especially for the people raised in the sense of, well, this is our land, it's our home, but that's been taken from us. And not only that, you've also got the legal implications of the fact that basically almost any non-white is a protected species. So, you're always, and also you're not permitted ethnic or racial collectivism as a white person, and it's just generally not there anyway. It's been sort of beaten out of people, and we weren't that much that way to begin with, and it was kind of the demographics were crept up upon us, so there wasn't the awareness of the need for it anyway. Now, what I mean when I say that London will bother me in some ways less than Birmingham or Bradford is London at least gets to be a global city, and there are certain, I'm not a big city person, but there are benefits to that, where I can sort of, in my ideal world, a global city would be very different. You might have people of sort of more selected foreign backgrounds, but they wouldn't necessarily be citizens. They wouldn't be able to monopolize, so they could start exerting undue influence within what is another person's home. But there are certain benefits in a place like London that Birmingham or Bradford or Leicester don't get. They're not international cities, they're just basically places where there's a load of disenfranchised white people who've had very ethnocentric and often kind of quite hostile foreign groups shipped in, and they've been dispossessed. So that will bother, and it happens in London as well. But at least there are sort of actually going to London more for the visitor than the sort of the native. Really, there's certain things that might be appealing about it that just aren't present for even like not even cities, provincial towns in the north of England, the old mill towns and stuff. And then horrendous things have happened because of these kind of influxes as well. So broadly speaking, I'm not an absolute purist, But I think, small numbers of the kind of the right people of other nationalities is not the end of the world. But I wouldn't sort of be. It would be like you're a welcome guest. You're not like you'd be treated well, but you don't get saying how things are run for the most part. There might be very, very limited cases where there's a very rigorous process by which somebody becomes a sort of adopted citizen. Do you know what I mean? But generally speaking, no, like a country's a homeland, as you were saying, the nation state, rather than just a global world of economic zones where loads of, 10 million people live in a city, but it's not really a home for anyone, I think that's just really miserable and sort of undignified existence.
That's a really nuanced and interesting response to that question, probably the most I've heard. When I lived in Soho, and I always wanted to live there. I bunked school. I was up there at 10 years old, and I thought, this is incredible. Coming from Dartford, I don't know if you know Dartford, you probably know it from the tunnel, but
yeah.
Somewhere like Soho, it's quite a difference. And I thought one day I'll live here, and I finally did. And it's almost like there's like a square mile of multiculturalism in the whole nation that is actually working. But as soon as you get out of zone 1, it's back to the just people in their own groups. And what's quite interesting is, I loved it there. I loved living there. And I wasn't around a lot of white people. I wasn't around a lot of ethnic English people. Around some. But what I think distinguished the others was finances.
And
it's something I don't hear talked about a lot. I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy sitting down. I'm quite happy going to drink at the Italian cafe, and they've all got plenty of money. And when I go to the Groucho Club, it's like it's a globalist dream, but they're all loaded. And there's that makes things somewhat different.
I'll tell you what, there's a fella called Idris who's his father's from the Middle East. I don't know if it's a Middle East or Middle East North. I'm not actually sure, but he goes by the moniker, very spicy, Arab social nationalist. Interesting bloke. I've met him a couple of times at Patriotic Alternative events. I had him on my channel last November, and we had quite a good conversation about this because he's quite sort of put it this way, he's far more sort of literate and versed in the history of certain things in the early mid 20th century than I am. I'll just say that, and you probably get that idea if you ever saw him on Gab or whatever. But we talked about some of the fringe cases with this sort of thing and how he talked about, first of all, money, and sort of a certain level of wealth and material comfort changes people, particularly when it's, you're sort of that kind of almost not necessarily jet set, but, it's the kind of, the globalist thing. And he made a point which is true, and this isn't an exception of cases because this is not the reality for most people in their lives. Most people are fairly sort of modest and fairly rooted to where they are. I would say I am, but with some caveats to that. No jokes in the chat, please. But there's a sort of, I forget how he worded it. I wish I could remember it. It was something to the effect of like, there is a sort of a level of, I don't know, rarefication almost at which there are other things you can have in common with people in a globalized world which actually sort of override race among a certain category of people. Like by being in a certain place and sort of having certain, I don't know, habits of consumption and cultural interests, you can speak the same language. Particularly, you'll have, you might actually have more in common if you're quite a deracinated person than somebody of a lower social class of your own race. But that's very much the exception rather than rule. Example I always think of, and this, who got, I don't know, like 18 minutes, 19 minutes in the sweepstake for solid SAS posting. I read an Andy McNabb book once. I think it was 7 Troop, about when he was his old sort of SAS and army career, and he answered some sort of frequently asked questions about special forces at the end. And somebody said, "What's a typical SAS soldier like?" And he said, "There isn't one. There's like there's ex-bikers, there's ex-cons, there's Fijians, there's like Kiwis, there's people from sort of the aristocracy, there's people who grew up in care." There's loads that's really different about them, but they've got the things that basically make them qualify for the SAS in common, and that's about as much as they need. And it's like you're in a rare, but then most people wouldn't get through army training, let alone the SAS. So the analogy is like, there are certainly circumstances in which there are people that can be very comfortable in sort of, like as you say, a globalist dream, and it's not the reality for most people. But then by the same measure, I'm a very territorial person. So I've never been like wildly patriotic, but I'm very protective of my sort of people and the idea of people treading on my toes and my people's toes. But then this kind of also relates to it. I've talked before about I went away to university for the first time, and I grew up in a very white area. But I knew a little bit about like Sikhs and whatever. I knew a lot about Islam and all this sort of thing. And I was also fairly familiar with sort of middle class, common and garden, liberal white people. And I was doing a sort of a liberal arts degree. And I ended up spending more time hanging around with like sort of people born in this country, but who were like Indian and Pakistani, where I was living, than I did people on my course, because they did my head in, because they were very sort of there. They were the typical sort of archetype of over socialized white kind of people. And it was, at least I never fitted in that well with them anyway, so I may as well not fit in with people that are a bit more interesting, I can learn a little bit more about, and have the sort of narcissistic novelty of being the odd one out. So it's a funny thing, you know. So that was quite a long answer.
No, very interesting. I mean, there's a film called A Swansea Love Story. This will go somewhere, and it follows the lives of about 5 or 6 Swansea white working class drug addicts, alcoholics, dysfunctional working class people. You know, there's these 2 lesbians there, and she's like, I won't bother to, you're the accent man. Oh yeah, and Art Close said, massive respect to you for the nuance of Irish dialects you've managed to achieve.
It's not as good as he thinks. I can mainly do the Travellers, so yeah, thanks though, Arkle Rocks.
Do as you like. He's a generous man. He's got me into golf. I haven't swung a club yet, and he's convinced me. Yeah, I'm old now. But I was watching this Swansea Love Story, and there's these 2 lesbians, and she's like, I met her in prison, you know, like, because I had 3 kids with like these other 3 men, but he's in prison, one's dead, and the other's my brother. And it was just, you know, bottom of the pile. I'll be honest with you. And I was watching it with a mate, and this was when I would identify as, you know, this was when I was a nationalist, an outright nationalist. And he said to me, my mate, and he's a good lad, and I've known him since we were kids, and he said to me, so, and I know this is abstract thinking, but he said to me, so you're setting up your ideal nation, yeah? You've got a bit of land, you know, a small country sort of bit of land. He said, do you take that lot, or do you take a few slightly better educated blacks on your island, on your new nation? And I argued with him. I said, yeah, but you know, these people are fucked. He said, all right. I said, they're fucked. I said, they're undereducated, they're undernourished, they haven't had a chance from the beginning. He said, all right. He said, would you take a load of Guardian readers who are nourished and educated in a particular way, rather than a load of blacks? And it's an argument. It's a fair point. And when you were talking earlier, you talked about your people and your group, and I wonder whether do we identify with individuals on a higher level than we do with groups? And which one of them is more relevant? Your story about being at university and spending more time with the Pakistani or the Muslims, I think you said, than the white people. And you said you could learn more from them. And so, you know, it's a complicated thing, because I also don't want English ethnicity and England, Britain, to disappear. I don't want it to continue on this route. But when I start thinking about why, sometimes it can get a little bit saccharine. Sometimes it can get a little bit nostalgic. Because the kids that are growing up today, teenagers, let's say, teenagers and kids in their young 20s, when I talk to them about how it used to be on my mum's street, and Daughter of Albion made a lovely video to a rant I made once, and everyone was like, oh, this is lovely. I was talking about all the doors being open and we knew everyone. When I talk to young white people, they don't give a shit about any of that. Now, I know they haven't had it, so they don't know what they've lost. But they don't care. They don't care about that. I'm a dinosaur. And then I think about when I was young, and old men, you know, with their like war medals pinned to their Danny Mac and their thing, and they're like, oh, when I was a kid, we were happy to get a bloody, a little bit of chocolate between the 20 of us, And I was like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Don't care about what it was like when you were young. It doesn't affect me. And so, I suppose what I'm just trying to do is problematize the whole idea of conservatism.
See, that's interesting because I sort of, obviously I socialise with nationalists, and you got people who are into different things, and you got sort of Christians, you got pagans, you got people who are into sort of, they'll even dress in quite a traditional way, and I'm sort of, turning up in my North Face and me Fred Perry. I'm not really that way. So like, and I've, for example, like all my life, I was sort of into history growing up, but it was all 20th century history. It was generally all stuff that you got moving pictures of.
Right.
I've said this before. Like, I'm autistic. I'm literally diagnosed. 90% of the people watching probably know I'm probably being a bit narcissistic, actually, because there'll be a lot of people that don't watch me, but they will have deduced that anyway already, probably. But I'm autistic, and I always think that's been the reason why, for example, there isn't that much sci-fi that I've never really got into that much sci-fi. If something breaks the laws of physics or what is like possible, like Donnie Brasco, like a fictional mob story is one thing that could actually happen. They're not, swinging at each other with lightsabers. By and large, with the exception of, like, I don't know, Terminator 2, I've never been able to suspend my disbelief. So anything that's a bit too distant, and anything too unmoored from reality or too unfamiliar to me, I don't generally like. What you were saying about the whole thing of, okay, the sort of the hypothetical, and it is a hypothetical of, would you take, a load of the most disenfranchised white people at the bottom of the pile, or would you take a load of educated Africans? I mean, without getting into the HBD spurgery, first of all, you got a regression to the mean, but then secondly, it's a bit like, well, there's an element of like, well, look, some of these people are arseholes, but they're our arseholes. I have a very different reaction to the sort of the wrongdoing of foreign arseholes on our own soil, which have been imposed upon us when the people doing it knew fully well that if we'd ever been asked, we would have told them where to go. If we'd ever had any say in it, none of it would have been allowed to happen. But we've been steamrolled with it, and hence you have these places which are very alienating. And there's a small number of people, as you say, you've been one. I probably would in certain settings as well, as I've said, where certain people can sort of feel comfortable in it, particularly from a point of view of just consumption and recreation. It's people's homes, though, isn't it? And as I say, you end up with your Bradfords and your Rotherhams and your wherever. And it's like I remember that I used to listen to Albion Radio. Was it Albion Radio? I always get Albion Radio and Radio Albion confused. But I used to listen to, there was a couple of nationalist lads did like YouTube stuff going back about 4 years, and during the World Cup in 2018 they were talking about it and sort of making a point, why can't people understand that, no, look, I would rather never get past the quarterfinals and have a team of Englishmen than, like, some people are like, well, but if we get more Fijians in, we'll be better in a rugby, or whatever. It's like, but that's sort of not the point, because the point is an English team. Do you know what I mean? And I think just it's Rudyard Kipling had it right with the stranger at my gate, and it's not a perfect rule, but it's a good rule of thumb, which is just, and this really, if you get into the nuts and bolts of it, it comes down to genetic proximity and similarity, which is why you're going to feel less alienated in Slovenia than you would in Somalia or whatever, because it's just a matter of degrees. And when you get into the top couple of percent of a society that, or go to a certain university or whatever, you're kind of dealing in exceptions rather than rules. Now, sometimes those are the people that disproportionately are making up immigrants. For example, if you look at average income for African immigrants in America, it's very high. It's fairly high in this country as well. But there's a lot more to sort of life than just GDP and whatever. There's just actually having a home. There's the compatibility issues of different groups, particularly when you've got the one group who they've had it imposed upon them, the conditions at wholesale on their own soil, and then they're also utterly disempowered. Like, you're even denied freedom of association. You can look at the Race Relations Act in the 60s. So the point of all of this is we are having this conversation in a context of a real number being done on our whole civilization across pretty much all the nations west of the Iron Curtain. There's only so much say we can have in this. I mean, to the extent that, like, I'm being very careful what I say because I'm on somebody else's YouTube channel. That's, we live under a regime in that regard. Otherwise we wouldn't have to dance around all the taboos, and you wouldn't have people all up and down England sort of looking over their shoulder and going, not racist, but before they say something which is basically non-compliant whiteness spoken. Do you know what
I mean? Do you think, when I said to you, do you think it's something we could achieve? Do you think that England, or let's say Britain, I think that's easier, will we achieve something where we get our land back and it's ours and it's largely an ethno state? I've always considered it a generational thing. Well, not always. That's a lie. I originally thought, I was kind of naive and thought things might turn around in a couple of years. But what are your thoughts there? Are we talking like hundreds of years? Are we talking a generation? Or
Well, it's not in the foreseeable future, I don't think. So, but then a lot of the future is not foreseeable, is it? The reality of this is, this was something I was going to go on and say, and then I didn't. In answer to the first thing, because to be honest, I'd spoken more than enough, and I forgot I was going to say it actually. But obviously, demographics are a crucial thing, but it's also not the be all and end all. There's a good reason why the powers that be in governance, media, institutions, and basically the people that ultimately control governments, and can kind of astroturf certain things in academia and whatever, and pass laws, why there are literally legal and all sorts of other soft power measures there to prevent white ethnocentrism and self-interest in the way that, Pakistanis have communities and community leaders. And, if there's a film on at the cinema they don't like, they'll all be there. You know what I mean? Because the best way for me to put this is I was asked a question once, would we be better off if we were 40% of the population in our own country, but we were ethnocentric and basically we didn't take any shit and we stood up for our own interests? And I said, yeah. Absolutely we would. Absolutely we would, because, the problem with this is, I was talking to a fellow called Culture, I think was in the chat earlier on. I was talking to him when I had him on my stream the other night, and we were talking about how people sort of see, I don't know, the George Floyd thing or whatever happened, and then they sort of they're dismayed at white people at large. And I totally agree. We all go through it in a fit of pique and say, look, if they ain't woken up by now, they're never going to. The Woodlander, I think, is also there tonight, possibly. I'm always used to seeing him in my own streams. He's possibly there. I think I might have seen him. Said, not true, because I thought that about all of you 20 years ago. And it's absolutely right. He's absolutely right in what he says. The thing with the situation we're in now is I ended up saying in that conversation that you want to get to a stage where you've got authorities that have a reason to think, if we push them a bit far on this, they might all stop turning up for work. And, it's going to be hard getting people to and out of the sort of local government offices because they're going to be bloody angry. I'm a pacifist for the record here. But what I'm saying is the idea of, like, they've got a meme in America, like National Justice Party and that white strike. There isn't the group consciousness and solidarity to do that. And there are obviously a lot of measures in place to ensure that isn't there, and that the only kind of self-identity you can have as a white person is a negative one, which is incredibly malevolent. And we know where it comes from, no need to get into the details. But it's just... No, the demographic thing won't be addressed, I don't think, at any time at all in the foreseeable future. Because for one thing, for that to happen, you're talking about a cataclysmic change of order. You're talking about some faction of the kind of elite and sort of institutional control across the Western world that have done a bloody good job of hiding their power level before sort of launching some sort of regime change, let's call it. Or, as I said, you're talking about a growing racial consciousness, which there are all sorts of measures there to prohibit and to block. Mainly without people knowing it's being done to them. So do they have the normality bias of, well, I don't really have an identity, I don't really have a race. But then once you start to sort of exhibit that, you come up against hard measures. You come up against the law and all sorts of other things. So the demographic thing, it's a massive thing. Basically, if you had a sort of if you had a white population in this country that was anywhere near as sort of ethnocentric and kind of ruthlessly self-interested as most of the other foreign ethnic groups in this country, I think particularly of like Pakistanis or whoever, they would in quite a ruthless way do things in their own interest, construct things in their own interest, write laws, devise policies in their own interest. And, there would be people who'd be happy enough to stick around but there'd be other people who think, well, it's not really on our terms anymore. Can't do this, can't do that. This place doesn't feel quite so welcome anymore. I don't really get away with taking liberties with these people anymore because there are actual legal and sort of there are community responses and whatever. And these are not people that you take lightly anymore, just in the sense that you can't take the piss. And that's also a long way off, frankly, because, again, everything is arrayed against us, but you'd never get any sort of... But demographics is only part of the thing because actually... At least if you stand in your ground, you'd be better off being 40% and being able to stand your ground and having collective institutional power and having a thing of, well, if we piss these people off too much, they all stop turning up for work and everything, goes mad. That's one element of it. You'd be better off that than being like 75% anatomized like we are now and sort of browbeaten. And most of our people basically are victims to psychological abuse. That's what I would say.
I was speaking to my missus earlier. She never went to school. Well, tell a lie. She took herself to school for a year when she was 16 so she could learn to read her own language. because she was working in the rice paddies when she was 4, so that her family could. And I said, so she's not educated. And I said to her today, you know, Cambodia's 98% ethnic Khmer people, and they are all Buddhist. You know, religion is just, it's alive and well here. They celebrate it regularly. It's almost impossible to celebrate their culture and their religion. It's that, you know, it's that significant. And I said to her today, do you think it would be good if Cambodia had more, well, I said barangs, which is like the Thai falang. It means foreigner, but it's actually European, because she will distinguish between Africans, Chinese, Islam, as she calls them, and barangs. And I said, do you think Cambodia would be better if there were more Islamic people, more Africans, more Chinese, more barangs? I didn't want to sort of pick on a particular group, but just other people from the world, more of them coming into the country. And her first answer was, well, for an holiday, no problem. And I said, no, to stay here, you know, mix the country up a bit more, because it's 98% Khmer. Would that be better? And she said, no, because it's ours, it's not theirs.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that almost instinctive.
Oh, it is.
No one's that.
And this is why there's a whole sort of there's a whole regime, there's a whole sort of matrix of things there to get you to sort of not believe your lying eyes and to disobey your instincts and to eschew them. And the reality of this is particularly the case for white people, but this is what I meant when I was talking about, you know, the sort of the archetype of the middle class, liberal leaning white 18, 19-year-olds. It's like they always annoyed me because I think I was always innately more right wing than they were. Right wing in the sense of just territorialism, as I said, not even positive ethnocentrism so much as just leave us alone, you know, leave us alone, don't take liberties, you know. But yeah, I knew exactly where that was going, because that's the only answer anyone would ever give. And as I say, that's why, you know, European peoples were never asked whether they wanted any of this. And the way I always put this, and I've been doing this for probably 5 years. With kind of like, I'll call them like regime loyalists, as all the compliant white people, you know, true believers. They're all different terms. The way I always put this when I'm trying to corner these people is say, right, okay, so name a single thing that you could say a non-Briton, or you could say a non-European, you know, go outside of the actual race. Name a single thing, and very often I'll just word it in quite a candid way. Name a single thing a non-white person can do that we can't, that we cannot survive or thrive without. I've never had a good answer to that yet. And this is the point of it. It wasn't done because it's not even true that it was done in Britain specifically because, we needed to rebuild after the war. Not true for various reasons I won't get into now. People who watch my own streams will have heard me do the bit on that before, but, you know, they had American military support in Japan, but they didn't flood loads of people into Japan, despite the fact that they had about 8 times the losses we had proportionate to their population. You know, these were all bogus pretexts. You look at the story of the Windrush. I won't get into that because we're on YouTube, but it's, you know, this was done because it was ultimately, you know, globalism was first of all just you know, economically and just in terms of eroding homogeneity and whatever was in the interest of the powers that be. And there's also a very malevolent, I think, element of racial vengeance within a certain faction within the powers that be. But again, we're on YouTube. So but nobody would answer. Nobody would say what she said. Nobody in the right mind would say, yeah. And he said, and the distinction's right. Yeah, for an holiday, fine. But, you know, having a stake in our society and saying, oh, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. No, because it's yours. That's it. I remember. Sorry, this is the last thing I was going to say. I remember in my sort of counter-jihad days becoming sort of more and more hardline and more territorial, and just kind of having the idea of as a mantra, this is ours. And that's literally it. It's just possession of your own territory. It ain't a lot to want, but it ultimately goes against the interests of basically people that I became known as describing as, you know, megalomaniacal psychopaths. But yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Tola, are you part of a movement?
I've been involved and done stuff for Patriotic Alternative, and I'd sort of consider myself, I suppose, part of a certain contingent of the British nationalist scene. In terms of my kind of like my social life and whatever, that's generally with more unaffiliated nationalists now. But there are exceptions to that. I go to the big PA events and stuff and sort of see mates and things like that. But yeah, and I've done activism and stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so are you part of that organisation?
I'm not formally, no. But I have been, and I've been involved in activism and stuff, and I'm broadly supportive of them as well. And a lot of my mates are still involved in it.
Are you an activist?
I have been, yes. I've done different things before. I've been involved in banner drops and things.
To all of these, I have been at some point.
Yeah.
But you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I still would be, but it was mainly when I was more involved with PA. Yeah,
it's a fair point. You're not any of these things full time. You're. Yeah, I think that's a fair answer. I think I should accept that. I was treated pretty badly by the nationalist movement. I had some really weird shit to put up with. People outright lying about me and it was just relentless. And I had Mark, and I got a lot of time, a lot of respect for Mark. I consider him a friend. We talk, we have long phone calls. He likes to talk. He does like to talk. And he stood up for me. I'd done the Three Stooges with Dan and Hugh. Dan had 200,000 subscribers, Hugh had 80,000, I had 3. They had very little to gain in terms of collaboration, but we got on well. We done a good stream. But those two got so much grief for it as well. And you had a little bit of that. You were on the Absolute State of Britain. And you made the mistake of falling in love with someone who was outside of your ethnicity.
Half, yeah. Well, that's a whole story. Yeah.
Well, the question I want to ask you, obviously, if you don't want to talk about anything, you just say, "No, fuck that,"
go on.
I'll just go. But the question I wanted to ask you, because I do watch your streams, but not all of them, and you might have talked about this, and I might have missed it, but you left that TASOB, didn't you?
Yeah.
Were you asked to leave?
Do you want me to tell you the story?
I do want you to tell me the story.
Basically, yeah. So, Fash Sarkar, as I took to calling her for shorthand, because I did meet her through the nationalist community. She's half English and half Indian, but you wouldn't mistake her as being white. She looks like a North Indian or whatever. I got to know her. We had certain things in common, like both vegetarians and other different sort of things that matter to me, like both teetotals, both vegetarians, all this sort of stuff. And we sort of clicked. Well, tell a lie, actually. I asked her out on a date first and she wasn't that keen. But I dug my heels in and won around. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. When this
and I'm going to ask you about that.
Well, I mean, the greatest thing with that is, the first time we were introduced, and I told this story on the Absolute State of Britain without identifying her specifically at the time. First time we properly met, I'd arranged to give her a lift to and from this kind of nationalist event we were at. Euro from TASOB sort of knew her, and she didn't know what I looked like. I was very upset conscious and whatever. And she sort of Euro brought her over to me because she'd missed her train to get where I was going to be picking her up. But she'd got stuff to load. It was a hike. She had stuff to load into my car before we were all setting off on this hike. And she got introduced, and Euro sort of goes, "Yeah, this is Tolly." And she goes, "Oh, Tolly, you don't look like I expected. You're really good looking. You've got glaucoma, bless her, But no, she and I thought, I'll tell you what, I've got a shot here then, because I'd already got an idea that there was a chance, or I could, I'd see how it went, I'd put in the hours and whatever. But she didn't take to my manner that day, and I had to win around. But basically, once I did, the lads were like, "Well, look, you can't be on TASOB. We're like mega edgy, and we're like hardline, and we got a reputation to think of." This was like July 2020. Nativist was particularly uncompromising about it, and it took a while to sort of be like, "Okay, yeah, so I'll be going." That was all agreed. Okay, that's fine. It was about 6 weeks before I left, and then I was going to record. We recorded my last episode. I did all the sort of goodbye stuff.
Oh,
and we
got to the end. Hang on.
Yeah, go on.
There was a little bit there that you stepped over. That was all agreed. I obviously don't want you to say things that other people said, because they're not here to.
Yeah.
But did you say? I assume. I mean, did you plead a case, or did you just say, I take it I'm going, or
no? I think I did it first, but when sort of Nativist particularly sort of dug his heels in, I thought, well, look, the thing is, we are pretty hard line. He's kind of it's me that's sort of done the thing that would be perceived as a bit transgressive to a lot of people. So it's right that I go rather than him, you know. But we came to record the last episode. The recording didn't work. We realised that at the end. So we did a live stream in lieu of it. I didn't want to leave on a live stream. So we recorded another episode. And that happened by literal coincidence to be recorded 2 nights before my first live stream on YouTube independently, and came out the day after. Because I decided a couple of months before I was going to start streaming on YouTube. So the two things ended up weirdly coinciding, because it took a while to sort of, we just plodded along for like 6 weeks, fine. You know, after that was all sort of agreed and arranged, and we you know, they actually got a replacement in, and then that was it basically. I don't know if you were going to ask about when I came out and talked about it and the reaction to that, but anyway, yeah, over to you.
Well, I mean, I you know, I've kept no secret. My fiance is 100% Khmer, and I get endless shit from it. Still randos. I get signed up for the most peculiar websites, 5 or 6 a day. That someone sitting there going, "I'll show him." Sign him up for another Muslim dating site.
Plenty to be said about that. It should be me that's signing those up for.
But here's the thing. I don't think you can have it both ways. Oh, so there's problems in England. There's problems in Western Europe. There's problems in nations of European descent. What are those problems? Well, there's been a multicultural globalist imposition. And it's getting to the point where all the things you said earlier, the things that we're not allowed to congregate and fight for our own in-group preferences, all those things, and which is to admit that you're living in a multicultural society. Because if you ain't, what's the problem? And then, you know, if you were to say, when someone says to me, you know, oh, you know, you're with a foreign bird, and I'm sort of like, well, all right then, let's go through your life. Who made those jeans you're wearing? I mean, where do we stop this argument? You know, now I ended up with a girl from Vietnamese descent when I was in England. You know, her parents were Vietnamese boat people. That's a multicultural thing. They were sent to England. That was considered all right. That happened. They had a child in England. I ended up with her. But it was weird that you said we were hard edge. We were hard line.
What I'm saying is, obviously, it's the way it would be perceived. And I mean, again, you know, I got the piss ripped out of me naturally. You know, when it eventually sort of, I didn't talk about it openly at the time. Basically, there were sort of upset reasons for that. It makes you a lot more doxable and stuff, which is a whole other conversation. But like, yeah, what you're saying, and this is the thing, I've always openly acknowledged it. You know, like for example, when I sort of talked about it for the first time, I had a lot of people there were a lot of people giving me grief. A lot of people sort of. And I can accept that if it's sort of constructive and it's kind of done in a civil way, however pissed off they are. But there are other people who are just unconstructive about it. And there's a certain archetype you see on the internet, which is people that don't really. Well, there's a lot that can be said about it. Maybe we'll get to that. Maybe we won't. But basically, there are other people that said, "Look, it doesn't matter, mate. It's fine. You don't have to explain anything." I'm like, well, no, I do. You know, I'm a white nationalist, and I was on basically I was on the absolute state of Britain and whatever else, and. For those that had never heard it, because it's sort of stopped, I think at the end of last year. I'd left in September 2020. Yeah, it was a sort of a fairly hardline British nationalist podcast. So it does warrant some explanation because it's a bit bloody strange. But then, in certain regards, I suppose I'm sort of strange for a white nationalist. For one thing, I was going to say strange for a white nationalist. I did an April Fool's joke in 2021 saying I was Lebanese, and a lot of people still think I am. A lot of the people I know in real life believed it. Because I've got the sort of swarthy complexion and dark hair and all that sort of thing, and I could probably pass, but it warranted a bit of explanation, I think. And what the thing is, on the face of it, yeah, it would seem a bit hypocritical. My thing with it was, again, I was always a bit unusual as a white nationalist in the sense that like I'd not found it. For example, like, you know, within sort of white nationalist or Wignat, as it's sometimes called, circles, there's a whole joke about the yellow fever thing, isn't there? And I never had that, yeah. But you know, I'd never not found objectively attractive, sort of like, I don't know, South Asian girls, unattractive because they were South Asian. Because I'm my sort of rule is kind of like straight hair, round eyes. When I say rule, it's just like that's just intuitively. I don't really catch my eye if it's not that, but it's a kind of a case of it's, how do I put it? It was also kind of like the actual compatibility on other things, and the fact that we did meet through the nationalist community as well. So in certain regards, yeah, we sort of had a lot that we understood mutually, and things in common that I wouldn't have in common with like that many average sort of girls totally of the same stock as me, you know, rather than just half, because obviously she's English on the one side. But yeah.
Sorry, what was
No,
it
go on.
like for you when you realised you were falling for her?
Do you know what's funny when I look back at it? There's kind of not a lot I could say, but what's strange when I look back at it is I do think, how did it, not that it would have changed a thing, by the way, it wouldn't have changed a thing at all, but I thought, how did you not realise it would be a bigger issue than you thought it was? Do you know what I mean? You know, like I think I somehow just
that I'm thinking about,
yeah,
because
no,
Tesla
that's right.
was hardcore. I
Yeah,
didn't
it was,
like
yeah.
it. I wasn't that. I wasn't.
You weren't
I
that angry.
we don't see eye to eye. No, well, I'm not. It's not a question of not being that angry. I'm fucking angry. But I
Yeah.
want to be positive. I think positivity gets more done. But that's not knocking it. You know, that's not to say we're just different. But you know, when you fall in love with someone, it's fucking complicated, because it's going back to your childhood, your parents, how you learnt about love, dependence, loss, death, life. These are the big things. And then on top of all of that, you suddenly have to thought, this might also cause some ideological problems in the movement I'm in. It must have been, you know, that's because I was with my missus before I became a nationalist, which was a stroke of luck.
I'm a pretty strange case in that regard. Yeah, absolutely. But it's funny, you know, you do, because I've known a few, and I've got a few friends to one degree or other, people of not entirely white background, who through various means, for various reasons, have ended up kind of within the kind of, you know, pro-white community, activism, whatever you'd want to call it, because, you know, they've got one foot in the camp, and then they've got a similar sort of alienation and outrage at the things that are going on, and the sort of the malevolence of it all, you know. I've made this observation before. What I think is interesting that they tend to have in common, not always, because I don't think this is the case with Idris, who I referenced before, who's half English and half Arab, I think. It's usually the case that they've got like a sort of an upwardly mobile white father, and then sort of a mother from another group of kind of like a higher status or whatever. Like I've known people who are half African, half East Asian, half, you know, Indian, obviously, and it's usually they've got like a relatively strong white father figure, which interesting that they have that in common. You know, it's very much the polar opposite of the sort of JD Sports kind of archetype that you'd think of like, you know, well, we you know, we can all sort of fill in the rest for ourselves, you know. But yeah, that's an interesting thing about it. I mean, it's funny you mentioned Dan getting stick. That's a bit of a pet hate of mine as well, is when people get stick for being like e-celebs or whatever. You know, well, let's be honest about it. You know, how many of us got red pilled down the pub? Now, most of us probably, I didn't. You know, e-celeb's quite fucking important, and nobody more important than Dan, probably 215,000 subscribers. There was a reason they shut him down. He was literally costing the Labour Party votes, and the Labour Party were literally lobbying for him to be shut down. With respect, how many people, however good their intentions, that, I don't know, leaflet or do banners, all of which I've done, can say that? They can't. So there's become a bit of a cultish thing at times of having a pop at people for doing videos and that. Well, how did you get here? Because I bet it wasn't work, mate, or whatever. It might have been in some cases, but the vast majority of cases it's through the internet, you know. So that gets on my nerves. And there's also an assumption that if you do things on the internet, you don't do things in real life. I've done streams before and then got up, you know, 4 o'clock the next morning for activism or something. I've been up till 2 a.m. planning things, and then been out at 5 a.m. or whatever, you know. So
yeah, that is an insane, you know, that's insane. On my channel alone, where we probably, between us, got about 30 or 40 people off of drugs and alcohol, and probably about 100 people considering it. And well, we might as well go into this actually now. I feel as someone who's been a long time drug addict, and I'm not clean, NA clean. Just last year, I relapsed on intravenous diazepam. I fell asleep during a stream. Boom. And so, I've got problems as well. But I get the way alcohol gets a pass, and yet the damage alcohol, and me and you were talking earlier about porn as well. I think the damage that alcohol and porn have done to Western Europe is so underestimated, and it's given a pass. I was told by someone, there was a Discord server. I don't want to name that person, but they were all jumping on me about being a degenerate and all this. Well done. And in that same Discord server, there was a I don't know what they're called because I don't have Discord, but there was like channels or whatever, and the wank percentage of each picture they were putting up. So they had pictures of women, and it was like 80% wank sort of. They were scoring women for wanking basically, and they knew that there were people in that Discord server who were like young teenagers, 13, 14. And I just feel like alcohol gets a pass. I've listened to nationalist channels talking about drug use, blah, 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 blah. And I even said to one of them in the messages, I said, "Do you drink?" And he went, "Well, you obviously haven't watched my channel much." I don't stop drinking. And I thought, well, then you're killing yourself. You're killing yourself. And the only distinction I see is a legal one. So these hardline nationalists, oh no, we're just staying on the right side of the law when it comes to our drug abuse. And that pisses me off. It really pisses me off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's...
Did you say you're teetotal?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's funny, and there are a few reasons for that. I was going to say before, actually, and this is something that came to me when I was on PWR a couple of weeks ago, just on the theme of people people crabbing on the internet, because I've encountered a fair bit of it, mainly when I sort of did the big Fash Sarkar announcement. Something dawned on me, and this is a real obvious thing, and people will sort of intuitively think, well, yeah, that is obvious. I said the other week after I was on PWR, and I said afterwards, in any endeavor, the most vocal critics are almost invariably people who do absolutely fuck all themselves. And the internet, for all the wonderful things about it and the things it's facilitated, like you getting people off drugs, me doing racist impressions and that, it sort of gives people a pedestal for that sort of thing. It's I think it's a net benefit, but there are a lot of really bad things about it. I mean, pornography, so it's a whole other subject with the internet and everything. But that was another point I was going to make on that. But the alcohol thing, and I've realised this more and more through kind of being in this and doing streams and getting people messaging me. Somebody will message me something after a stream at 1 o'clock on a Friday morning, and then they might message me a couple of days after and say, "Oh yeah, I don't know if I made sense then. I was a bit pissed and whatever." Now people have a drink on a Friday night, but I mean, I'm teetotal because for one thing, I'm autistic. My palate, other than sort of taking the spicy food, and that's not a lewd metaphor for me private life, other than taking the spicy food, my palate's not changed a lot since I was about 3. And if I don't like it, I don't like it. And I never, you try a beer when you're 13, 14 with your dad, and it's an acquired taste. No, it tastes like bloody poison. I don't like it. And I've never acquired the taste for it. I don't drink tea or coffee. I've never acquired a taste. Now, I did drink, my student days, I'd drink a little bit socially. I'd try and find something. I would either go for the cocktail or I'd go for like a double bourbon of some sort and a Coke, Diet Coke or whatever. And basically, I've been pissed, but I've not done it. I was never like a massive drinker at all. I didn't like the taste of it, and I didn't generally like being around drunk people. I'm generally quite an irritable person, but I think I overcompensate when I'm drunk because I'm thinking, well, if I'm irritable anyway, if I'm less inhibited, I might get my head kicked in or I might break somebody's jaw. Now, the one instance in which I've ever sort of got in a fight in my adult life, I can't remember it. I hit some lad at a house party on New Year's Eve and got chucked out and got let back in and didn't even remember doing it. It was very apologetic. But that's very out of character for me because I was always a really nice drunk. I was like mediating people's arguments, but people just behave stupidly. You know, the amount of bloody stupid violent crime and whatever that people do when they're pissed. As I say, I see it firsthand, the amount of people that drink more than they should, say things they shouldn't when they're drunk, and they'll come back to me and say, oh, yeah, no, I was a bit pissed the other night. And you just think, God, it's normality bias again, because as you say, it's a legal distinction. It's a part of our culture. And I think, you know, we've always had raging pissheads. You know, this isn't a new thing either. It's not. There are lots of things you can lament as being sort of things of the atomized society we live in now, kind of like post-World War or whatever. But I think it is it's a really bad thing. And I hate being around drunk people because I'm quite high-strung anyway. And it's like they're unpredictable. You don't know when they're going to turn dirty guts or whatever. I don't like it.
Unless you're drunk, they're a nightmare. And even on other drugs, if you know, they're still a nightmare unless you're drunk. They're awful. Can I have a 1 in the chat if you've been drunk in the last 7 days, the last week? And by drunk, I mean, you know, I don't mean shit-faced, but I mean you've had enough to have changed your perception of reality. Just let us know. That's going to be my girlfriend. Sorry, Tola. Priorities. I'll get rid of it quick enough. Darling, I'm doing a video. I'll talk to you later. Bye, love. Love you. There you go. Yeah, and all the damage it does to families, and you know, I've done the scrubs will know this, but I've been to probably over 20 rehab centers, and you know, they tend to be half drug users, half drinkers, but the thing they nearly all have in common is childhood abuse.
Yeah.
And you know, I think there's so many sort of missing links here, because especially with alcohol, if you're a heroin addict, not you.
I'd lose a bit of weight, which would help.
But you know, it's obvious that there's something wrong with you, mate. You've got problems.
Yeah.
But people who are broken as children can get away with self-medicating with alcohol because our society accepts it. And that, I think that's a real concern. And
I think people self-medicate in a lot of ways. I think I probably medicate my sort of low-level anxiety with humour and trying to crack a joke. I've come to think that that's a way of, it's a pretty constructive way of doing it. But I think, you know, that's a poor analogy, because again, it's not like it won't wreck your life. But like, I think people are trying to balance things out, and also I've not got the childhood trauma. So imagine if you know, the sort of awful things that happen in the world, it's horrendous. And again, some of these things, as much as, you know, from a sort of more traditionalist or a nationalist point of view, you tend to lament, you know, some of the atrocities that are very sort of particular to the circumstances in which we live. Things like abuse, they're not new. I don't know how much better or worse they were, or less bad or worse they were in the past, but it's not new. It's always been there. And I mean, another thing is, you know, you get into our thing, you don't want to lend. I'm not literate in sort of, you know, kind of psychology and all of that, and the kind of Jung and Freud and whatever. You don't want to lend credibility to Freud, because Freud was known to be, well, a bit of a fraud in a lot of ways and had sort of malevolent agendas. But there is a lot, and I see this in people I've known, and that there is a lot about people's relationships with their parents, and particularly their mothers, that shapes who they are. You know, I've known people that are sort of quite, they can be sort of quite, like I, for example, I'm fairly emotionally self-contained. Other people I know in family and friends, they're maybe a bit more emotionally needy, and very often they had kind of quite aloof mothers. This is real pop psychology time, but it's just a pattern I've noticed.
No, but you're absolutely right. I mean,
hard. A lot of these hard men you read about, you know, who are bare knuckle fighters, football hooligans, SAS, they either had like a father died suddenly when they were very young, or they had abusive fathers or abusive stepfathers. And there are loads of people that experience those things that go on and lead quite normal lives, but there are very many people where, like there was a reason. One of the I forget his name, who said, you know, show me the child of 7 and I'll show you the man. It goes way beyond that. The things that happen in your formative years that can sort of scar you and leave you with battles to fight all your life. But it's the world's quite a brutal place, and you know, bad things that happen in your formative years can really, you know, have a terrible effect on you.
Well, this is the other problem I have with the whole degeneracy thing and the whole drugs thing, because, you know, again, I'm picking a number out the air, but my experience across about 20 rehabs, I'd suggest about 95% of the people were sexually abused in those places. And when I hear nationalists slagging off junkies, slagging off drug addicts, you know, oh, now they're giving them needles, now they're doing this, now that, you know, they want to put more money into this and all that. They're your fucking people. They were abused as children. Now, it might have been family, usually is. And Hugh on the offensive used to get right into this one. He said incestual abuse is a white man's problem. And I'm not, maybe I shouldn't have said that because he's not here to defend it, but he presented some very convincing arguments. And nationalists who I talked to and I listened to were just saying, fuck them. Fuck those drug addicts. Fuck them. And I'm thinking, hang on, these are your people. These are the people you love. These are your ethnic brothers and sisters whose society abandoned them, put them into inverted commas care, where they get more sexual abuse, all nearly across the board. And then when they grow up and there's no help for them, they go and find it themselves and become crackheads or smackheads or whatever. And nationalists slag them off. Fuck them. They fuck those. They don't need any help. I'd rather we should. I've heard on probably, I don't know, at least double figures, people say we should gather them all up, take them to a field and shoot them. And I'm thinking, so the people who the culture that is against your people, you're gonna do the shooting for those people, are you? You're gonna actually do that. It's awful. It's awful. And again, why? You don't hear him say that about boozers.
Yeah, it's one thing. This is a sort of thing you encounter all the time in the world now. And a lot of the time it's because people aren't aware of root causes rather than symptoms. I mean, that would probably be one example, because particularly if you've not had that sort of experience, you wouldn't be able to identify the sort of cause and effect without sort of actually studying it, looking into it, or maybe knowing somebody who's been through it and could tell you that. But it's what you see in the world an awful lot. And we hear so much of it, all mental health, the mental health crisis. Yeah, well, look at the way people are fucking living. God, I could reel off a load of things. You know what I mean? You've talked about it before when you were on my stream. You talked about the whole thing of the rats and the incentives and whatever, when they're atomized. Well, this is the thing. The world is full of this sort of thing of, let's deal with symptoms. Oh, heaven forbid anyone consider that we might want to actually, evaluate the fucking root causes and look at the thing from a sort of, I was going to say root and branch. That's very sort of new Labour, isn't it? But, look at it from the point of view of like, maybe just structurally and fundamentally, there is something about the way things are organised and the incentives that are all wrong. Your example when you were on my channel about, it's funny, another thing I was going to say before about, you do encounter this more and more as well. You definitely encounter a lot of fringe movements, fringe personalities, and people, and also just the online anonymity thing, and people just shooting their mouths off and saying stupid, edgy things. And people also at times react, as I say, in a fit of pique. I've probably done it before myself, where you say, look, if people haven't woken up by now, fuck them, because they never will. And it's never true. That's never true. It's certainly true that the vast majority of people will be sort of passive and bovine and malleable, and ultimately, because they're malleable, they respond to what they get the most of and what's got the most perceived credibility, which is mainstream media. If the mainstream media was saying completely different things, they would think differently. I mean, that's true, but for the same measure, you don't, for a community or a subculture, you don't need a majority of the population. But the fringe movements, fringe people thing, you encounter that a lot. And as I said, you also encounter the examples of people sort of being a bit damaged in different ways. But I sort of lost my point. But yeah, your analogy about the, I forget what it was. You'd be
the rat world. So what happened was, for people who don't know, they put a rat in a cage. It was a very famous experiment. Some psychiatrist, which don't trust psychiatry. I've got Jeffrey Sharla coming on to rip the arse out of psychiatry. The bloke who wrote the book Addiction is a Choice. He's going to be worth watching. But he put a rat in a cage and he gave him 2 bottles of water. One was water and the other one had cocaine and water. And the rat, he went to the water, went to the cocaine, went back to the cocaine, run around the cage 1,000 miles an hour, kept going back to the cocaine until it killed him. And the point was, fuck knows what the point was. About 15 years later, a psychologist who isn't part of the weaponized mental health machine of psychiatry, he said, well, how about we do this? And he built a rat village, and it was a huge, not a little cage, a huge sort of arena, a rat arena. I think it was called Rat Village or something. And it had a whole family, extended rat family, their children, his uncles, all that. and there was things to do. There was things they could dig. It was a community of rats. They put the cocaine in, they put the water in. Most of the rats tried both. None of them went back to the cocaine because it got in the way of their community. Because addiction is actually the opposite of connection. And if you've got no connection in your life, you're fucked, and that's where they're leading us. And yet, if you have got connection, why would you compromise that? Why would, if you've got a loving family and both parents and extended family, and your work means something to you, it's useful work, not useless toil, and then you have this drug and it's like, no, it sort of feels nice, but I've got things to do, and my brothers and sisters are thinking I'm a bit of an arsehole at the moment. You don't do it again because you're getting what you need as an animal from that.
Something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How did I get onto that example? What was it you prompted me with? Sorry, because
we were going. I don't.
I think
know.
You were talking about. No, you were sort of saying about people. Well, get all the drug addicts and put them in the field and shoot them. And again, this is what I mean about that. Just not considering. Okay, so like, why? How did that become such a sort of a problem in the first place? But as you say, there is a hypocrisy about it because a lot of these same people, it's like, well, yeah, I drink. When you said the bit before about the person you asked and you said, do you drink? And they're like, oh, you've never watched my streams, have you? I thought of the Brent bit from The Office where it's like, oh, he said, do I not drink? Oh, no, he drinks. He's trying, he's making a big thing about it, and it is, the cultural attitude to it is it's very hypocritical, But you do. This is another thing you encounter. Yeah, you encounter people edge posting and sort of fringe personalities, and that in itself, again, is I don't want to exonerate people and sort of deny they've got any agency, but that again itself is often like it's often a thing of frustration because it's a feeling of impotence, frustration. What they're going to do? Well, all you can do is lash out on the internet. Like to give you an example, again, like I said before, the biggest critics are always people that don't do anything. That's very often the case. I had somebody in the PWR chat when I was on a couple of weeks ago who said the guest followers are probably only interested in being entertained, and I thought, well, I can take that one on the chin if they're following me. Do you know what I mean?
Heard you mention it on your stream.
I've never pretended to be Keith Woods, so but yeah, it's one of these things.
What an insult! Yeah. What a terrible insult!
Oh, I know. That's back of the Toller Live DVD, that one. But it's just. What I think I was trying to say is, like, go back to the example before. Like, I fully acknowledge there are people I know that don't like me because of it now, and I can sort of respect that because they've got a more uncompromising position on these things, and that's their entitlement. The whole thing with the half Indian girlfriend and everything. There were people that didn't like it, but they were sort of at least civil about what they said or whatever. Then you get other people on the internet who were just really venting their spleens. The video's still up. It fucking annoys me because it's like one of my most viewed streams. It's like, oh yeah, when there's a bit of controversy, everything fucking turns up, don't they? But basically, the stream's still there, and you can read the comments. And it was about a 50-50 like to dislike ratio when you could still see dislikes on YouTube. This was January last year. This video, and most of the comments are people giving me pelters, And at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world, but. I was talking about this in a direct message group on Twitter a few days after, and somebody very sort of a very prominent sort of writer within in sort of who's held in very high esteem in the dissident right. I won't name him. He said, "Well, look, okay, it's not the ideal, maybe, but you get these weird things that happen sometimes in life, and there were certain past regimes, let's say, where again they looked at the case on its merits." And he said, "What you will find," and I'd already sort of observed this, and you could tell this from the way people were writing and what they were saying and usernames. He said, and this is not a cope, this is just true. He said, "You'll find that the most sort of vicious criticism you get will be from young single men." And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, and frustration is one of them, and sort of despair at the world they're in. Because the other thing you got to remember is, and this will sound a bit self-aggrandizing. I stream to about 100 people a lot of the time, so it would sound a bit self-aggrandizing, but I've probably watched people with similar audiences before, and I love the things they do. And there's this thing of when you sort of know and follow somebody you don't know in the real world, you only know them through a screen where they become a bit larger than life. And if there were people that listened to me and had sort of that thing, oh yeah, looking forward to Friday night dinner or whatever, and then they found out something about me that really pissed them off, but also indicated, well, why is he not with a white woman? What does he think there aren't any good ones left? It's a bit like, well, fuck. If this is somebody I sort of whose opinion I trust, that's a bit of a black pill about the world, isn't it? And it was more complicated than that. But
yeah,
the point held about people that are sort of, again, frustration is another thing that makes people sort of, again, not to not to trivialize the real horrors that people can go through, which really set them on a vulnerable path in life for addiction and things. But I mean, you'll see it again. People lash out. I've known people in nationalist circles who would be a bit rude and disrespectful in the way they speak to people sometimes, and you have to bring them into line at times. But at other times, if they do it with me, I would just take it with a pinch of salt, because I knew some of the battles they were fighting, and they were sort of in a form of pain and lashing out. And it's just sometimes you only give them so much leeway, but you understand, well, Christ, I'd rather be in my position than theirs, you know.
Yeah, for sure. So something else that you said in that, and it's absolutely gone off my head now. Hang on. We've done the drinking. We've done the thing. Someone in the chat said something. Thanks to everyone who's donated. I've been trying to put them on the screen. Raymond thinks you're the most eloquent guest I've ever had. Nice one, Raymond.
Big fan of Chaz and Dave, then, Raymond, is he?
There you go. You said that earlier, didn't you? Little joke. Bit of praise. No.
Well, that's just a very British thing, that is, isn't it? That's that over-socialised, chewed up, British passive-aggressive thing.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Interesting.
It's just self-effacement.
When I first read it, I thought he was talking about me.
You should have just styled it out, mate, you know.
Someone in the chat said when we were talking about when I was talking about addicts being sexually abused and neglected, and the system has let them go. Someone said, following that logic, Muslim groomers are just lonely men. No, I think you might have missed the point there. Maybe it was my fault for not explaining it clear enough, but no, that's not what I'm saying at all. John Morton says, great stream, lads, very thoughtful and humane. Right, what I want to ask you, we'll move on from that, but obviously if you've got anything more you want to say about it, of course you can.
Can I just very quickly say one thing, actually? I'll be totally honest now and say that, I mean, talking about the getting pelts from people and whatever, I got a bit of stick when I had you on, again, because there were a lot of lies told about you,
yeah.
And I'll be totally honest, that's the only thing that's kept me until now from getting you back on. But fuck it, we should just do it anyway, and I have thought that. And it's a matter of arranging it. But if you ever want to come back on, we'll do it, because you're there watching a lot of the time anyway, which I'm always very flattered by. It's not.
I usually don't say hello because there's a lot of scrubs in there, and I don't want them all to say hello and distract from paying you attention. That, I think that seems fair enough. Again, I mean, this because you've had a bit of grief because of behaviour you indulged in, it's interesting.
You put it so poetically, yeah.
I was the unnameable. I was a stand-up comedian for 10 years, right? And when you're a comedian, you tell jokes, you make people laugh. And I wasn't a joke teller. I wrote one joke in 10 years. I never wrote anything down. I just told stories. And one of those stories was about fucking a dog, right? That's it. And I was a dirty comic. I told blue jokes. They were in the 70s. They were called blue jokes. And suddenly everyone's going, "You dog fucker!" And I'm like, "Hang on a minute. You do understand that there's a difference between jokes and life. You get that? I don't know.
It's Chinese whispers is a big part of it as well. I mean, Chinese whispers for one thing.
You don't even have to give it that excuse. I told that story. I told it on a stream.
But that word would get around from bad actors to people, and they wouldn't know that it was, that's it. People don't hear it firsthand.
You'll think.
Which is not to excuse it either, but, yeah.
Yeah, but you're right about the bad actors, because another lad, right, so we done a thing on my channel where I said, right, because we occasionally have these things. We had scrub stock where it was like Woodstock. Everyone sent in a bit of music. Well, loads of people sent in a bit of music they made. It was a 4-hour stream. It was brilliant. We've had a few others. We've had ones where we all draw each other, people whose faces we don't know, to see what we imagine they look like. And one day it was suggested, and I ran with it, old photos of us when you were teenagers, because they're the funny ones when you're in your shell suit and you've got your little, and your perm at the back and your flick at the front. So I said, right, you've got a couple of weeks, people, send them in the subject, put old photos, blah, blah, blah. And someone in the chat said, can we send photos of us when we were babies? And I said, and I said this. I said, look, if you want to send pictures of you as a baby, you can, or toddlers. I said, but the idea is that it's something to laugh at because we all look like twats when we were teenagers.
Yeah.
And one of my haters, he clipped me saying, you can send photos in of you as babies. And that's all he clipped. And they said, degenerate Dangerfield asked his subscribers for pictures of them as kids. He knows that's not what happened. He must have known because he watched it. He's lying to his own viewers.
There's an element of, with some of this stuff, it's bewildering because there's an element of evil think. There's an element of like the inverse of evil thinker, evil doer, because it would never occur to you to do something as just fundamentally dishonest and devious as that. You think, well, why would anyone else? But no, they would. And again, there are often a lot of reasons why people do that. One thing I've learned as well, actually, through sort of,
Hang on, before you move on.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Yeah.
What are they? Tell me.
Well,
because I haven't got a fucking clue why you'd do that.
Well, I mean, there are different things. I mean, in certain cases, I'm not saying this. It might be a bit tinfoil to sort of say it was in that case, but in certain cases, you'll get people causing trouble in our community because they've got incentives to just cause trouble within the community for its own sake because they don't want it to gather momentum. They might be state actors, they might be sort of political opponents or whatever. But one thing I was going to say is, I mean, one thing I've sort of observed with, let's call them more antisocial personalities, is if they behave like an idiot in a Telegram group, for example, and they get a moderator kicks them out, they'll hold a grudge like you wouldn't believe because they'll feel personally slighted and they're like a child that has been sort of chided and they feel belittled. And then that will genuinely sort of, that will be the impetus for like a real like animus on their part. I've seen this with people where they're still going on about, oh, you know, Euro banned me from the PWR group, he's an arsehole, and they'll still hold a grudge over it like 2 years later. So again, I think a lot of the time you're just dealing with fringe personalities, just people who are prone to being arseholes to one degree or other and just want to cause trouble for whatever other reasons. You get more orchestrated things, as I said, where it's political opponents just trying to, you know, shit stir or, you know, slander people, cause divisions, because that can be quite easy to do. You know, it's like the difference between trying to score a goal and trying to boot a ball clear so you don't concede one. It can go anywhere other than the goal if you're trying to get rid of it, can't it? Whereas if you're trying to actually do something positive, there are certain criteria. Do you know what I mean?
Fair point. Yeah, they were good points, actually. So sorry to interrupt.
No. Well, I interrupted you. So, I mean, which is must sort of me thing in it, really.
Anglo said you had a great stream yesterday, Toller.
Oh, no. I enjoyed that one. Yeah, thanks, Anglo. Yeah, I'm doing another one Friday, and then I've got a guest on Saturday, which is not the way I usually do it. I usually have a guest on a Friday and do my own thing on a Saturday, but the guest could do Saturday, couldn't do Friday. So that's what that'll all be announced later on anyway. But yeah. But thanks, Anglo. Cheers. There was someone else you wanted to go on to, wasn't there? Sorry.
Yeah, but it's skip my mind. Hang on. People doing that. There was another one. There was something else. There was the dog thing. I mean, I had Laura. Laura emailed me. Just one question, Chris. Did you have sex with a dog? At least Mark knew I didn't. He just said, yeah, that these people are bonkers. Okay. Another thing that I think is missing from the movement, and for me, it's a glaring omission. It's something that I can't understand why. Why do I not see? Now, you might be able to correct me on this, but why is there not a lot of talk about, what would you call it? Financial awareness, you know, financial freedom, passive income streams, telling our people how to improve their lot in life. Because I don't hear it. I mean, we do it all the time on my channel, but I don't know if it happens. I haven't seen any of it. Maybe there is, but that would seem to be a fundamental. If you've got a nation state and the native population is suffering from very many angles, at least equipping them with a few quid would seem to be a sensible part of any movement that is looking to improve their lot. Does that make any sense to you, or do you think it's totally
No, it
wrong?
does. No, it absolutely does. Absolutely. I mean, I think back again to the woodlander. Now that's not a sort of a thing of your income streams, but it is a sort of an alternative to, you know, the rat race. And it's not an easy undertaking, but it's an idea of living outside of the system. For one thing, I'll say about the woodlander, I was talking to a big fan of the woodlander social the other week and saying how much time he always seems to have in his vid. There you go. So he's on. There he is. How much time he always seems to have in his, and he's, you know, he's got to do his bits around the woods and, you know, sort of cut his firewood and whatever and repair the generator. But he always seems to have so much time, you know. And it's quite sort of cathartic and relaxing watching his videos in that way. But the point you make is a very good one, because I mean, what's one of the big things that keeps people from going public as nationalists, including me to a degree, but probably less of a degree than it was actually, because I've got one or two other income streams now anyway. But it's the sort of don't lose my job. A lot of the time, people aren't actually afraid of like, oh, you know, Antifa will kick me door in, because with respect, that can happen. But a lot of people get doxed, and it doesn't always amount to much. I wouldn't want it to happen. That's why I'm not on the screen now. But it's, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, you might be prepared to go and do, you know, if you're in the army, you might be prepared to go and do something and have bullets fired at you, but it doesn't mean you're not going to wear a helmet and a vest, you know. So it's, but in terms of, that's a bit of a weird thing to say, isn't it? But like the income streams thing, yeah, absolutely, because it just independence in general. Like even if you weren't sort of somebody who had non-compliant views on the world, let's say, being independent from sort of a 9-to-5 or shift work or whatever, or having a little bit of independence from it, not even total independence, but just a bit of maneuverability. It's a massive thing. I mean, I sort of I had a change in my own circumstances because I don't want to get too specific about it, but I got pissed off with my employer. So I took a different approach to things, let's say, going back a little while. And my channel actually now, because of the generosity of people who watch, and one especially, a fella called Wyatt Gilbert, is it's a big income stream for me now. It was a bloody nice top up anyway, but it's a really, really important income stream for me now. I'm in a situation at the moment where I've got like 200 hours a month of my time back, and I'm at least because of being able to, I'm at least because of having been able to pay off debts and things, because of a couple of good sort of outside income streams, the channel being one. I've said this to people a few times, like I've said it to family, you know, time and energy are incredibly valuable resources, but the way the world works, people very often can't afford to treat them like the very valuable resources they are, because they've got to go out and earn, and they don't get a lot for the hours they put in. So they expend an awful lot of time and effort. They come home from work and you've got a few hours, you've got things to do, and you're tired and resentful in those hours because most people don't enjoy what they do anyway. So could we focus more on other ways? And I'll be honest, it's not something I'm massively knowledgeable about, you know, your passive income streams and things, but just little tricks here and there.
Well, Toller, historically, over 20 years, S&P 500 indexes, put as much money as you can in over 20 years. Historically, you're 100% going to do well.
Play the long game.
You will be able to retire with a couple of million if you can get 500 a month into your ISA.
Oh.
Garrett, that's 100%. The numbers are in on it. It's so basic. And so if you're trying to encourage youngsters, and you know, it is a numbers game to an extent, nationalism, maybe talk to them about these things, because as I just put up what Woodlander said, it's a great comment. It bloody helps if you're not reliant on the system you're fighting.
Yeah. This is one of my sort of things, is always saying, like, minimize the amount of interactions you have with the system that are not on your terms, that are not to your benefit. Like my favorite with the Woodlander is always when he was sort of talking about, first time I heard him was on Morgoth, and he was sort of saying, like, people say to me, how do you, you've got to cut your own firewood and everything. You've got to think a year ahead. How do you manage doing that? And he was like, yeah, but you've got to go and sit in an office for 40 hours a week to keep the lights on and pay the mortgage. And then you get a week in Marbella a year as a coach.
How do you manage that?
So that's it. And I mean, it's maybe there could be more focus on it. The knowledge probably isn't there, but certainly the way that a lot of people do things, where just people go down the debt route and stuff, just for consumer nonsense. I mean, the Woodlander's talked as well about, I think, one of his daughters or something like that, just all the subscription services. I'm dead thrifty with that sort of thing, because I'll always, don't want recurring costs for things, and I don't subscribe to the papers. I don't subscribe to bloody Spotify and all of that. I'm or YouTube. that's money you're not spending rather than money you're sort of earning. But it's just
the debt trap is an absolute, just paying more than you even got the value for is ridiculous. That's like a surreal nightmare.
Yeah,
you're actually giving more money than what you got.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot that you could say about patterns of work and stuff. I always remember, bloody hell, it was a real awakening moment for me. Keith Woods had a fella called Anthony Migshaws on. I think he's a Dutch fella who talks about the banking system and that. And he was saying, we can't go back, but he was saying 16th century England, well before the Industrial Revolution, peasant might work 3 months of the year, and there'd be hard days and it'd be hard work. But, the Industrial Revolution came along and I mean, bloody hell. And things are a lot better than that now in most regards, of course. But it's like, I've experienced it. I'm not the most industrious of people, and I don't like most of the wage work I've done at all. I'm not good at doing things I don't like doing. I need to kick up the arse to do it. But you might only be doing your 8 hours a day, but you come home and in the few hours you've got left, you're tired and you're resentful, and you don't feel like doing productive things. Like, I don't want to go for a run. I want to do something nice. I've done something I don't like all day. If there are ways out of that, this is what I mean about going back to being able to treat time and energy as the valuable resources they are, and thinking of quality of life. I've got family members having this consideration now because of change, positive changes in their own family circumstances. Like, do I go back to work? Do I not? And these sorts of things, because work's a bit of a grind. I mean, talking to political views, there are places in the world where they're doing a 4-day working week. And like how you do that whilst competing in a global economy is another matter. But like in terms of quality of life, you'd be way better off. My old man's old enough to remember early in his working life, a 3-day week. And he said it was a lot more productive. You do 10 to 12 hours on those days, but you get 4 clear days, and it was better.
It seems mad not to be talking to people about that, because it's attractive. It's attractive to be able to say to young people, you can retire at 40.
Yeah.
If you make the right decisions, there's black. I mean, in America, they're on this a lot more than the British people are, to be honest. There's countless YouTube channels. I'm not talking about fucking investment gurus. That's just all scams. But there's blokes in their late 20s who own 2 properties. They've got a varied portfolio. They're all over the place. They're worth millions, and not because they come from a rich family or they inherited something. They just done the right thing with the money they got at the time. And it's just absent from the movement. It just really is absent from the movement, and seems a bit silly. And this isn't a dig. But when I know you can say to people in their 20s, get 3 jobs if need be, you're only going to have to work for 15 years and you're going to have a couple of £1 million, tax-free, no offshore banking, tax-free. That's a fact. When you've got that reality on one side and you've got selling tea on the other side, I'm thinking, that seems a little bit imbalanced there. I'm not convinced.
There's a reason, we got the expression "fuck you money," and again, that's not dependent on the system that you oppose. It's it's a useful thing to have. If you sort of you work at a place with a HR department where they find out that you have non-compliant thoughts, you're in trouble. So I'm repeating myself, but yeah, just freedom. Speaking to somebody who sort of hates sort of like wage slavery.
Yeah.
You make a very good point, because we probably could focus more on that. And now there is an awful lot to be said for having nationalist businesses and kind of forging a bit of a community where we keep our money amongst ourselves to a degree. That's a good thing in its own right, but it's something I'd like to know more about as well. Just the idea of I think a lot of people, and maybe this is a particularly sort of British thing that we have more so than maybe Americans do in our sort of cynical nature. Like, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And I think that obviously holds true. You were talking about your investment gurus and that. Yeah. But nevertheless, there are just little things that you can pick up from people in life where it's like, well, that's a better way of doing it, isn't it? And it's almost a bit like a shortcut. And they are there, but it's just a matter of being able to sniff out the bullshit, isn't it? And, get sort of trusted advice and whatever.
There's so many angles that come off of this, because if the reason I never had kids in England was because I wouldn't have been able to afford a nice house, and I don't want to bring 2 kids up in a bed sitting Putney. No. That doesn't. I had mates doing that, and it was going downhill fast, all of them. You know, if I want a family, which I'm now trying, is because out here I can afford a house. You know, and so if you're empowering young British kids who by in their 30s and by the time they're 40, they own their property outright. They're not the mortgage has all been paid off. You know, they've got other passive income streams. They can have children. They can have 3, 4, 5, 6 children because they can afford it. That's another issue about, oh, why aren't we breeding? Why aren't we breeding? Well, it doesn't look very appealing when you're on the dole, does it?
No, this is, again, and what does that say of the present order and the economic conditions it creates?
Exactly.
That to just go out and do a normal job. I mean, again, somebody asked me a question, and I'm terrible with these things because I've never been a reader. I'm just an intuitively kind of territorial, probably quite reactionary person in some ways, and I get very aggrieved at people taking liberties. But somebody asked me a question, what are your economic views? And I said, well, I'm stumped on that because I'm not economically literate or whatever. However, as a matter of conviction, I have the view that, you know, normal man working on, you know, the average income, you know, an economy should be geared in the interest of, you know, the people in a given country. Normal man earning about an average income should be able to keep a wife, a couple of 3 kids, a nice little house, a car, save a little bit, take him on an holiday once a year, and, you know, have the place paid off by the time he's 40. You know, it shouldn't be an insurmountable thing for most people, even people earning quite good money. It's like, oh shit, how do I pay 900 quid a month?
That's easy, Toller. I'm telling you, that's easy.
If people want to do it, yeah, this is the thing. But then obviously allowing for the fact that I suppose you aren't always going to get people onto the things of how to get ahead. It should be accessible just through doing the normal thing. But the point you make stands, yeah.
My point is, people have already earned enough money.
Yeah.
But they just done the wrong things with it because
that's also true. And again, that's a consumer society and just chasing the wrong things. I saw there's a fella in here tonight, Steve H, and I've talked to him before, and he's made a point about how, and I've noticed this myself. You go around some of the not necessarily the most salubrious sort of housing estates in Britain, you will see plenty of Audis and Mercedes and BMWs and whatever, because to a degree, I don't want to call it a cope. It's nice to have a nice car, but it's like, well, I'll probably never be able to live in, you know, a really, really nice place, but I'll get a nice car. And I've seen people in places where I've worked in fairly junior jobs, 19, 20, turn up in a new Audi A1 or A3. And it's like even a small one of those cars costs you a bloody fortune. I mean, it's a common thing people do when they're young. You drive and you're independent. It's stupid with their money. But again, that's the thing of culture and awareness, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. That same money invested and left in an index, just don't look at it for 20 years and you'll cash out millions. So the reason that came to my mind was because someone mentioned something in the chat, which I've also had. I'm assuming you've had it, the whole grifting thing.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I think we talked about it on your show, but you don't see that on BreadTube. I don't see the left moaning about people donating. And I just set up yours. I'd done a whole load of streams called the Dangerfield Dollar Drive, and I said, if you want more streams, I need a bit more money because I can do other work that pays better. My subscribers responded to that, and they gave me more money, and they get at least 1 stream a day now, and that's fair enough. But what is it among nationalists? I'll get some rando come into my chat at least twice a week. Dangerfield's a fucking grifter, and then I don't hear from him again. And it's like, well, I do think it's all right if I give 3 hours a day to get a few quid. Ain't big bucks.
I had somebody, I think I've seen him in the chat tonight as well. I had somebody in my chat the other week saying Mark Collett's a grifter. You know, he nearly went to jail for this. He's been doing this all his adult life. You know, do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, call me that if you want, but I mean, like, even then, by the same measure, you know, I've not done a fraction of, you know, I'll never do a fraction of what Mark Collett's done, but by the same measure, actually being on Tassa was probably a bit of a bloody legal risk, to be honest, in this world, you know. But it's a case of just like, it is. Do you know what? I think you might have talked about this when you were on Millennial with Woes last year, and I'll be honest, it emboldened me to be a little bit more, how do I put it, a little bit more kind of unapologetic about it. Because I've never asked for money. Like, entropy's there because, well, bloody hell, why not? You know. But by the same measure, I take a certain amount of pride in, and again, I've not done a fraction of what you've done, and probably never will. But you know, keeping people sane is worthwhile. Going through understanding a lot of things we understand in our community is bloody traumatic. You know, And it's like it's the old they live thing, putting the glasses on, and you can see quite a world around you, which in a lot of ways is quite horrible and getting worse. As much as you try and find take your pleasures in it and whatever, but it's like, keeping people sane and just having a bit of a community. And I'll say this as well. Sometimes I'll get stick about, well, what do you do? What have you done? And whatever's okay. You can come on the channel if you want, and we can talk about what you've done, because I can point you to like even probably 3 people within a 45-minute radius of me that I didn't know in the real world, that I know that were either red pilled by me or mobilized into a real world community by me. And there'll be a lot more. And this was not for a show with massive listeners. Now, that ain't a lot compared to most sort of people who get called commentators or whatever. But I'm quite proud of it. I've not got the highest expectations for myself. But you know what I mean?
People almost rely on channels like yours, and I'll tell you why, because they do mine. Because I get emails every week saying you don't realize how important you are to the people who come to your streams. We've got four, well, one's in remission, 4 people with cancer. That's quite heavy. It doesn't get much heavier than that. We've got people trying to give up drink. We've got people whose kids they can't see and who's had their house taken away from them by the fucking courts. And these people have got, they've been completely atomized. They don't want to watch a fucking telly. And once a day, they can go somewhere where people understand them. Yeah. And they can just say hello. People know what's going on there. And the other night, I think it was 2 nights ago, this kid come on. He was about 14. His mother was there, but she was just off camera. And he said, and it was heartbreaking, and I rarely shed a tear. I'm a bit like you. I'll deflect praise and that.
Oh, I'm soft, I'll be honest. I'm dead soft. I've got upset on streams before, so.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a very Latin temperament,
His mum and dad split up, and I think it was just before lockdown. So not only has his old man done the off, but he might be watching now. Hello, Edward. But he hasn't got a group of friends, or he can't live his life. He's sitting in the house that is now a third less, And he said to me, your stream got me through it. And everyone in the chat was just going, and I, at the time I tried to hold it together, but afterwards I just thought that's a good thing. Yeah. It's a good thing in a world where people are stuck at home. And that's not just lockdown. That's most of the time, to be honest. I mean, if you're going out, restaurant or drinking, if you don't want to go to another fucking restaurant and you don't want to drink, you're at home. And if people can come on like they do your stream, like they do, and like they do plenty of other people's, but I do think that the community element of mine and yours is like that comment you said. Someone says, oh, he's more interested in entertaining people. That people need that, and they need that sense of community. And yes, it is digital, but we've put loads of people together in real life. And I regularly say to my subscribers, if any of you lot are going through something, you don't need to go through it alone. I reckon I can get another scrub to your house within a couple of days. And we've been putting people together for years now. And to be called a grifter, it's just like, just fuck off. You don't see any of that on American YouTube. It's just not a thing. And I think that goes back to what you said. It's probably a working class thing at heart.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable what you're saying there. I've got nothing that can quite compare to that, but you do get people saying, you don't realise how important what you do is. And I mean, this is some autistic bloke with a broken laptop sort of doing impressions of an impression of Ian Paisley, but there's no accounting for taste, is there? But there you go. It's a case of like, we had a case, and this is like it sounds really trivial, but actually it's not. And I like animals and stuff, but there you go. Somebody will clip that now, of course, won't they? But they like, 14 Reasons, I think. 14 Reasons. One of the people who watches my stream sometimes, his little beagle was going in for like quite important surgery, but it's bloody expensive. And he just put an appeal out. He said, "Can you share a link to the GoFundMe?" And it was like it was about $1,000, I think, in Canadian money or something. And we passed it very easily, very quickly. And the little beagle had the surgery and then was right as rain after that. They had the surgery within a week, and it just. When you can just do, they're only little things, but you're one person. I'm a sort of I'm not a particularly competent person in many things in life, you know. So I've got the highest expectations for myself. So if you can do just a little, even a little good thing,
but
is great. You know?
you're really putting yourself down, because why do they turn up all the time? Because it's important to them. It's important to them.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, again, at some point, you've just got to say, well, yeah, you know. But I'm quite proud of it, because again, you keep people sane, and I know that because I've watched and listened to stuff for the same reasons. Other stuff, as good as it might be, I'll avoid, because again, it's too much sort of rage porn. So I kind of, I try and I don't always avoid that by any means, but I try not to overdose on it. Like I said, sometimes somebody will ask, "Oh, what do you think of this thing in X, Y, and Z?" And it's like, well, I think the same of it of all the other sort of things of that nature. They're things that happen because we live under a really horrible occupation, and while I can't overthrow it, what I'll try and do is keep some of the people that are suffering the most sane. You know, so yeah, there you are.
That's an interesting point, actually. Me and Way of the World never really got on. Thank you, Anglo. Nice sentiment as well. Me and Way of the World never really got on. But he asked me to talk to some girl that was having problems with drugs, and I was happy to do that. But I couldn't watch his video. I just couldn't watch his videos. Now, that's not to say they didn't have a purpose, because for people in their early part of their,
exactly,
less of a better phrase, red pill journey.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that woke me up. That's the sort of thing that made me think, whoa. But, you know, 8 years on, that drone music, and I just know. And, you know, I want to give out some positivity, some encouragement, and you know what, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. What is something like what? Oh, you'll know it. You fight at the front line because of what's behind you, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We have to still show that we as people can talk to each other and get on well and have a laugh, and that's important. That's important.
Yeah, definitely.
Tola, can I open up some questions to you?
Absolutely, yeah.
We're nearly 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm very flattered.
Anyone's got any, thank you, Planet X, that's very kind, and it's very kind from you, Anglo. Let's not flood Tola with questions, but if anyone's got any questions you want to ask Tola, feel free, or me, but you know, I'm here every night, so make use of it. I'll prioritize grifts because they're grifts, but I will try and get as many done as I can. There's always a little delay here, Tola. Don't think you're not important.
I'm not important when I look at my numbers, mate. They're half what yours are.
Yeah, we didn't get on to porn, which is a shame, but we'll do another one of these in 6 months, and maybe I'll put this to you. Go and do some research. I'll go and do some research. That sounded awful, didn't it?
I was just doing research, honest. Yeah.
Go and have a look at some source material.
Source. Well, that can go either way, can't it? Source, yeah.
There you go. Willow, I don't know if this is actually a question to you, but Sargon and Tommy, did they have a chat? I don't know anything about that, Willow. Do you, Tola?
Does Willow mean like? Does Willow mean? Oh, for God's sake, Horus, you can rely on him, can't you? Yeah. Does Willow mean were Sargon and Tommy having a conversation, or is Willow asking like, did like either of us watch them on our way to sort of?
Yes, Willow. Yes, sorry. Yes, Tola, you're right. Yeah, I did. Yes, Sargon was my entry point, as he is most people. I can't stand the bloke, to be honest with you, but he was my entry point, so he also has a role to play. So yeah, sorry, I got that wrong. Tola, this is a little bit behind closed doors, but go and look at our chat, mine and yours, in Telegram, and how quickly it got onto a certain subject. Me and Horus, exactly the same.
Oh yeah, why doesn't that surprise me? Yeah.
Sorry, people. Exclusion is a bit naughty, but they were private messages, so I can't talk to them. Here we go. Oh, this is interesting actually, because I was really into the Depp trial, not because I'm interested in celebrity, but I am interested in culture. And I think the Depp trial was like a nexus of so many different things. I found it fascinating. So Raymond, thank you for all your donations. You've been fucking semi-automatic grift machine tonight. What does Ayatollah think of the Depp trial? Any thoughts on that, Toller?
I am something of a renegade on the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial, because
You know that much, though.
I know that much. Yeah, of course. Yeah, certainly know that bit. I was very contrarian on my view on this. My view on this was that you had the Wagatha Christie trial going on concurrent with it for a little while with Rebecca Vardy. Bloody hell, what a climber she is, right? Mercenary, versus Colleen Rooney. And for me, that was way better. You know, that was like, why would you go to Palm Springs when you could go to Butlins? You know, you got Jamie Vardy going in there, getting the court drawings in there, giving him eyelashes like bloody Dame Edna Everage. You got Big Wazza, court drawings of Big Wazza, toughest paper round in the world. He's 36 years old. He's about bloody my age, and he looks like he's sort of been cast away at sea for 50 years or something. I loved it, but I mean, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. I mean, I thought it was funny because, like, when the trial verdict came in, Johnny Depp was up on Tyneside drinking with Sam Fender and Jeff Beck or something.
He was playing on stage at the Albert Hall with Jeff Beck. He was playing guitar with his whiskey bottle severed finger on stage with Jeff Beck, and Jeff Beck done that obviously because Johnny Depp's guitar isn't great. But obviously done it as a come on, mate, relax, look, let's do this. Yeah, literally while it was being read out.
Yeah, I didn't really follow the Depp versus Heard trial, but from the sounds of it, yeah, she was a right piece of work. And I mean, I've read enough of her Wikipedia to know that she's very much the archetype, but probably the sort of woman who was highly sort of aspirational on the way in, and you know, the sort of that industry tends to really mess people up, chew them up, spit them out, and drive them a bit mad. You've only got to look at your Britney Spears and all these sort of people, and it turns some of these women into harridans, and it sounds like she was one, certainly, and they have the incentives to do that, but occasionally even they take a liberty and it backfires a bit. So yeah, can I just answer Willow as well very quickly and just say I was somewhat of a closet admirer of Tommy Robinson on my way in. I thought he was actually very good for what he was at the Oxford Union in 2014. Sargon, I was aware of, wasn't a massive follower of, but I listened to a bit. But one of the key things with Sargon for me was when he spoke to Millennial Woes, because I was a sort of counter-jihad type, and I saw a Sargon thing retweeted onto my timeline. It was March 2016, and it was a conversation, 4-hour thing with Millennial Woes called The Case for White Nationalism. And I found it very, very interesting and quite sort of illuminating. So I hope that answers the question for Willow. Yeah.
That's interesting. The one that done me for Sargon was when he had, you do a cracking impression of the fella, American Renaissance.
Jared Taylor, yeah. Shane in the chat is the man for that. Bleeding holograms, yeah.
He had him on. And he also used to telegram me with his impression, also very good. But he had him on, and he kept saying things like, I want to agree with you, but I can't. And words to that effect, and I just thought that's not fair. That's not how it works, and you know that's not how it works, Sargon. You've lost an argument. Jared Taylor has logically proved a point, and you're just refusing to acknowledge it in your own words because you don't want to. No,
I don't want to get too specific on this, but I think Sargon might be playing a certain role there. I've heard things about Sargon, good things I would say actually, where I think when you describe that, it makes me wonder: is he trying to sort of speak the thoughts of the viewer, who needs to be brought along a little bit to a sort of a level of moral courage to confront certain things? Don't know if it looks like it doesn't make sense from the look on your face, but when he's saying, "I'd like to agree with you, but I can't," I don't know. I might be giving him too much credit. But like, the idea that like he might be trying to put like, imagine like a sales pitch where somebody's saying, "Oh, that sounds great, but what's the catch?" It's almost like a counterpart to that in some sort of sales pitch for a bloody vacuum cleaner on QVC or something. It's like saying, "I'd like to agree with you, but I don't feel I can." Maybe what he was doing there, I didn't see it, but was setting Jared Taylor up to say, "Well, here's why you should, because X, Y, and Z, it's just right, and this, that, the other, and it doesn't make you a monster," or whatever he might say. He's maybe trying to set him up favorably. I don't know. I
think it happened so many times. I just thought, what is going on here? It felt to me like he regretted getting Jared Taylor on because he wasn't able to beat his debating points. He wasn't able to win.
Yeah, you may well be right. I mean, my thought also is basically what Juno's saying in the chat, which is maybe he recognises his role in the red pill chain. I wonder this about Peterson as well. I don't know.
Okay,
yeah.
That's a fair point as well.
Yeah.
I don't know what Justin's saying. I mean, you always get asked to do and say things. That's your call. If you want to, it's your call.
No, I absolutely will. Justin's a great bloke. Yeah, so I certainly will, in the voice of Justin Barrett, say the dreaded N-word.
There you go. I've just realised what it means as well.
Yeah. He's actually talking about the word nationalism, but there you are.
Well, I made a video about the N-word and it was nationalism. We got to 2 hours without an impression from you, and I don't mean that as an insult. I thought you might appreciate it.
Sometimes, yeah. Some of them, I get asked to sort of conjure up these really bizarre scenarios where I'll do an impression of 5 different people with completely different accents and voices, and then also just do the dialogue. And I'm like, fuck off. But they've quieted down a little bit because I think people got the idea that it was pushing it a bit,
We used to have a game at college where you had to say something that Elvis would have said in the style of a drunken sailor, but with the mannerisms of Margaret Thatcher. And
that's basically the formula for my streams, as dictated by the bloody audience,
Well, we were smoking jazz cigarettes, and the problem was you'd forgot the first one by the end of it, which was made it hilarious because your mate would be there just going something like a brick wall, and then you'd all be in fits because no one could remember what anything was about. So there's that. Juno, that's a fair point actually, and Peterson as well. That is an interesting point, because if Sargon had have, my girlfriend's here. If Sargon had have yielded, I think that would have probably been the end of Sargon, because American Renaissance is no longer on YouTube. Hello, darling. Okay, let's have a look at a couple more questions. I had a couple of VARTs, so there is a couple. Oh, here we go again. Ian Paisley. Cheers, Rags.
Okay, very Irish thing tonight. Well, actually, Ragnar would not like that because nor would the big man himself either. Very much, Queen and country. Okay, all right then. For fuck's sake, Robert, don't be telling me you be shitting down the fucking sink. It's very blue, this stuff, but there we are.
I met someone once and he said Ian Paisley walks into a room and you feel him before you see him, and that obviously can be interpreted in a multitude of ways.
I wouldn't want to be saying that about people that worked in the BBC in the 1970s. Christ.
Sorry, coming. You've got an amazing pace to it because I can't interrupt it and I know what's coming. It's great stuff. Inquisitive stroke niggling Bill says, for the graft, well, nearly, I pay to niggle. It's less degenerate than OnlyFans, plus it's easier to get you to show feet. Yeah, okay. Ask Toller what happened. No, we've already talked about that, Bill. We've already been there. You'll have to watch the stream again from the beginning. That's why you called Niggling Bill, but we have changed it to Inquisitive Bill, so no dramas. Another question has come in. Hang on. That was excellent. The BBC in the 70s. Good Lord. Ow. No. Can you do an impression of me, Toller?
Problem is, I think it's probably just me, but slower and less angry, isn't it? A little bit more mellow and a bit more wisdom. So no, I don't think I can, if I'm honest, and I feel bad now. Woodlander asked me to do him as well. I'll probably do better at that, to be perfectly honest.
I'm quite glad. I'll tell you. Sorry, I've just had a load of cushions fall down, and I'm raising a foot. I've been doing workouts again recently, and no one needs to know the rest of that. Thank you, Al. I'll tell you, done a cracking impression of me, and it was unwanted. Unwashed. He done a very good impression of me. He done an advent calendar one year, and every day he done an impression, and it did actually. It was actually very good.
See, the Woodlanders one, because he asked me to do him, and my voice, I'm too clean living, and I'm probably a bit too young, so I can't really get the texture unless it's first thing in the morning. But you just sort of, you'd be sort of going, "Welcome to the woods. been a lot of stories in the news recently about things going on in Ukraine, about a looming energy crisis.
It's brilliant.
People starting to think about other ways of living, starting to think about other ways of getting by. And I think there are a lot of people who increasingly sense that this system isn't working. So it went off a little bit at the end, and it takes a while because he's very contemplative, unlike me, you know.
I could see him there when he looks around and he looks at his roller.
The chickens. You hear the chickens. It's all in the pauses, isn't it? That's the thing. It's in what you don't do. It's in how long you leave it without doing anything, you know.
Anglo, nice one, Anglo. He wants some Saxon FC, please. I don't even know what that is.
Oh, bloody hell, we'll be here all night. Do you know what? I haven't even got the text to hand. It's in my emails. We'll do another one. We can come back to that if you've got time, Chris, because I'm mindful this is a long one.
It depends how drunk the missus is, because if she's drunk, then she's going to expect some action, and it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. A little question, and mate, you know, I do watch your streams, but if this has been through and you know 1,000 times, just say I don't want to go through it again. But you're a very good impressionist. Why did you start doing that? When did you start doing that? And did you ever consider performing it?
I got asked this recently, I think by ODYSEE Proxy, who's very much the sort of the fella in the corner with his own tankard of my streams, you know, of the live chat on my streams.
I've seen that.
Yeah, I think, was it him who asked or was it somebody else? All I can say is the first person I can really remember impersonating was my old man. Don't want to get too specific, but my old man's got like a sort of a different regional accent to me. And I went from being 6 years old and people would hear his accent in the shop and say, oh, you're from such and such, aren't you? Yeah, I can tell by your accent. And not knowing there was anything different about it. And then within a couple of years, I could just take him off beautifully, you know. And then probably getting to secondary school, like, you know, impersonating teachers and things. Like, I didn't really get in trouble in school. I was quite a good kid because I'm quite neurotic and afraid of trouble. But the one thing I would get chucked out for now and again was like taking the piss out of a teacher or something. And that would get, you know, I also, by that measure, was never like a sort of a tough kid or like athletic. But I didn't get picked on in school because I was too good at taking the piss out of people. You know, nobody wanted to get the wrong side of the tongue. Yeah,
exactly the same.
Yeah. So I mean, impressions. Have I considered doing it professionally? I've considered voice work, and I might have a go at that if I'm not too sort of.
A lot of money in that. Lot of money in that.
Yeah, well, maybe I should. That's one thing I need to think about actually. Yeah, and I have thought about it because I will say there was a bit of a revelatory moment for me. I already knew I could impersonate people. I'd done it before in other spheres and whatever, and had people laughing with it. Like, but real realization for me was like I always remember it's going on 3 years now. I went to a camp that Mark Collett organised, and there was like 30 odd people there. We'd taken over the beer garden at this pub, beautiful evening. I mean, I looked the state, my hay fever was playing up, and I looked horrendous, but I was having the time of my life. And I was just finally among people where I realised, bloody hell, I would just sit there and sort of go, hello again there, folks. And, you know, and just sort of doing a bit of Morgoth and whatever, and, you know, and a bit of like, well, Millennial Woes is actually there, but doing Millennial Woes and people like that. And you'd have people laughing. I thought, fucking hell, this is brilliant. And it just became a bit of a thing. So I don't know. It's probably a manifestation of autism. Like, and I've always found as well, I can sing, I can hold a tune a little bit. People that can sing.
You've got a fantastic voice. I've heard you doing impersonations, but you can hold pitch lovely.
I did Ness and Dormer at ODYSEE Proxy's requesting me stream last night. And it never works out well down a microphone, sat in an office chair, you know, but it was all right. And, you know, yeah, that was just. It was just something I could do. It's one of those things you can either do or you can't. And I've probably developed it a bit, and you just learn how to listen for detail. But then sometimes I'll get asked, can you do such? And like, oh, could I do you? No, because you're probably not different enough from me. And like, you need really distinctive, almost caricaturable features to seize upon, to impersonate somebody. Like with the Woodlander, it's his pacing, it's elements of the accent and stuff. It's certain little turns of phrase they've got. And some people are just, they're a lot more neutral in the way that they sort of speak. Like if I listen to you loads and loads and loads more than I do, I'd pick little things up. You know,
really insulting. Thanks.
People, so no, but actually, it's a good thing. You can't get the piss taken out of it. What I'm saying is,
like a bland sort of.
No, but you're very correct. You're very sort of correct, is what I'm saying. Whereas other people have got weird little ticks and things, and you can seize upon it. You know, Mark Collett's. You know what I mean is Mark Collett's very deliberate in the way he delivers certain vowel sounds. And what I'm saying what I mean when I say that is that essentially, he's also got certain particular go-to phrases. And when I say that, and you know, and so you see how you sort of build it up. Like I've always wanted to hear somebody do a good impersonation of me, and the thing would be just sort of speak really quick, somebody was saying when I was on PWR, this is the only stream I'm ever going to have listened to on 0.75 speed rather than like 1.5 or whatever. I get a bit carried away. I'm like a white John Barnes, you know, if anyone ever remembers John Barnes' football punditry.
Speed it up for Mark and slow it down for you.
Yeah.
Because that was why I got into stand-up as well. I always used to hold court in boozers because I'd tell stories and everyone would laugh. Now, it became a bit of a problem, though, because socially I became a performer. And it drains you. It drains you. And then when you finish a story and everyone's laughing, when there's a silence, you're now the alpha male. No other bloke wants to compete with that.
Yeah.
So they're all waiting for you again. Your night out is now a gig. And I had to do a lot of work on that. And it took me about 10, 15 years, loads of therapy. You do not have to perform to make friends. You can just be yourself.
Yeah.
And I can still, I mean, to an extent, my YouTube channel gives me that outlet where I can stick it on and, you know, be a little bit more than who I actually am. Yeah. And actually in real life, I'm a very sort of nowadays quite a quiet, more listening than talking kind of person.
Yeah. I'm very different, like socially outside of, until I'm comfortable with people, I'm quite, people who know autism, for example, like, you know, somebody who's a school teacher or whatever, see me in a situation where I'm not comfortable, you can tell it a mile off. And it's just through my demeanor and stuff and a lack of eye contact. Among like nationalists and stuff, like my own community or just people I've become comfortable with, I'm a lot more gregarious. But in other situations, I'm quite withdrawn. I've been told, like, oh, you know, people I work with, like, I thought you were really arrogant at first because you never make eye contact. But I've learned, you know, you're all right. You're not that much of a twat, you know. But yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've had much the same, but for me, it was finding the balance because an extrovert is pretty much suffering the same as an introvert. They just deal with it differently. I'm not comfortable in this space. I'm going to retreat, and I'm not comfortable in this space. I'm going to perform.
Yeah.
And Rags wants Father Ted.
Again, Father Ted was sort of fairly sort of just fairly like kind of just an Irish, like I don't know where Dermot Morgan was from, presumably Dublin or thereabouts, but it was just an Irish accent to my ear. So I don't know if I could impersonate him. There's loads of Father Ted dialogue I could do. I mean, one of my favourites was the bit with Bishop Brennan and Bishop Brennan and Father Jessup, his sarcastic PA, and Mrs. Doyle, and that, you know, Mrs. Doyle's got a filibuster. It's like, Your Grace, is that a hat you're wearing? Actually called a beretta. Is it? Yes. I can't do Ted particularly. I can't remember anything Ted said off the top of my head. He said loads, but you know,
the distinction between those voices was incredible. They were completely different voices. Is it quite physical for you? Is your throat really working? Because
certain things can be like certain impressions. Like I was doing, somebody asked me the other week to do Big John Fury, Tyson Fury's dad, doing David Starkey tearing Laurie Penny a new arsehole. And that's kind of like, you're sort of going, you know, and I think that is as mean and grasping as some runt comedian. And it's like very, I'm going to have a fucking aneurysm, you know what I mean? So it can be, it depends. But like certain things. Hold on, what was I going to say now? The voices. Yeah. The other great one, Father Ted, was Father Percy. We run the gas off the electricity and the electricity off the gas, and we save £200 a year, that sort of thing. But yeah.
Nice one, Jambo. Yeah, Toller's well worth a listen. Give him a subscription. Great stuff, Jambo. Right, on that, what was on that note there was something. What was you saying there? Throats performing. Oh no, I think I've lost that. I think that ran away. Toller, I think we'll call it a day, mate. It's gone 2 a.m. here. There was something else though that I wanted to say that was important. But have a little think about the whole porn thing, and maybe we'll get back in 6 months or something, and we'll discuss that. I don't want to say anything at length because Horace is going to pick up on it. God
help us.
There's nothing you can say about it, but I think that's has done so much damage. You know, it damaged my sexuality, and it took me years to get it back. It took me, well, I'm getting into it now, but it took me years to get sex with another person to be a thing involving two people rather than just masturbation, and that's a fucking catastrophe, not only for a people but for an individual.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think we should go there at some point. All right, mate. Listen, thank you very much for coming on. I know you'll probably get more grief for it.
I'm well past caring about that. Don't you worry.
No, good stuff.
But I don't expect I will, to be honest. Yeah.
Well done with the streams. Keep them up. Good stuff. Thank you, everyone, for turning up. I know there was a few Toller viewers in here tonight, so thanks for giving me a go as well. That's always nice. And I'll let you go, Toller, and you don't need to hang around for the post housekeeping. Anything you want to share? When do you stream? It's what is it? What's anything new coming up? Where can people find your usual capers?
Yeah, so I put the link to my YouTube channel in the chat. I will also put in ODYSEE as well, because I'm in the process of getting that set up. Luddite though I am. So here's ODYSEE.
Put your link in the private chat because you probably won't be able to.
Oh, okay, yeah, good point. Yeah. Okay, right. So here's ODYSEE coming in there now. I'll get the YouTube. Do bear with me. Sorry. So YouTube is there, and then Telegram. Right. So what do? I do a stream on a Friday night, which is usually called a Friday night dinner. Last Friday of every month, or sometimes a Thursday, depending on what's going on in our lives, I do a stream with Bleeding Holograms, who's in the chat, and Homer Talk, who's on PA Talk tonight at 9 o'clock. We call that the Friend Simulator. That's usually a good laugh. I do a stream on my own. I've usually got a guest on the Friday nights as well. I won't have this week. This is a bit of an aberration, but it's because I've got a very good guest on Saturday from the other side of the water. That'll be 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon, but I'll probably be on 8 o'clock this Friday, I think. But normally I do. The streams can go on 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes, and I always try and respond to everything people say in the chat, as long as they tag me or if they say it on Entropy. So questions, impression requests, all that sort of thing. To be honest, I'll leech the audience for content rather than doing any preparation to a large degree. And then I do a stream usually on a Tuesday night about 9 o'clock, sometimes a Wednesday, called Secure Tolerance, which honestly I would recommend just give that a go just for the intro music, which is adapted from LMFAO Party Rock Anthem, in which I sort of leaned very heavily on with Bleeding Holograms to create. He did all the musical wizardry, and I came up with most of the little sound bites in there. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. I was really delighted to be asked on. I'd like to get on my channel as well again, but we'll get something set up, mate. But I've really enjoyed it. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, anytime you want. Thank you, Toller. Is it anywhere near the weekend? I always have a good weekend.
It's Wednesday. But you know what I've done?
It's Thursday here.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, sorry, I've gone and put Friday next to the Telegram channel for you, haven't I? And it's come up in the chat. That should say Telegram.
I was going to say to you that you didn't give me Telegram, but the links are in there, people.
Yeah.
I would suggest checking out Toller if you don't already, because it's much like our channel. It's a place you can go, and they're good people, and Toller's good stuff. Thank you very much, mate. Look after yourself.
Yeah, thanks to Horse for setting this up as well, and cheers, Dangerfield. Thanks, mate.
Ta-da. Toller. Amazing. Lovely. I mean, I always say this after I have a guest on, but sometimes they're difficult. They give you one-word answers, and you're like, yeah. And sometimes 2 hours, 20 minutes just flies by, and that's what just happened. And also, you have a guest on so that people watching can listen to the guest. I don't want to talk all the time, because you hear me every day. And so that, for me, was a successful stream. Talked about some interesting things. Talked about some things that need further investigation. I would have liked to get into the porn stuff, because I've been talking I've been talking to a few people in the dissident right about it recently. And also, there was something else, and I'm pissed that I missed it. When Toller mentioned the yellow fever, I think I've told the Scrubs before, but I have a couple of people a week email me and say, I'm on the dissident right and that, but I'm having a fucking great time out in Thailand, but I feel like I can't tell anyone. And I'm like, yeah, that's a problem. That reminds me of when I was a communist. When I was a communist, you're not allowed to enjoy yourself. They've got their zero-sum cake game up around their ass. They're like, well, if you're enjoying something, if you have a nice meal at a restaurant, someone else is starving, so you're not allowed to. But of course, I was like 24, and so you are having good times. But if you go and have a one night stand, oh well, you're just exploiting women. That's it, and especially if you pay to play, well, that's just wage labour, isn't it? Slave wage labour. And so you can't tell people who you are. And if you can't tell people who you are, that's not reality. That's the opposite of reality. That's lying. And when people in the dissident right are having to lie to each other because they had a good holiday in Thailand, yeah. And, these aren't major things, but that does happen to me regularly. But the alcohol thing, the porn thing, the financial awareness, if we prepare ourselves for the future, it puts us in a stronger position. Because if you might live in a lovely place now, you might have a couple of kids, you might be 27, your missus is pregnant with your first kid, and in 4 years' time, you've got 2 lovely kids and a lovely house. In 5 years, that might be a ghetto. Can you afford to get out? Because if you can't, you're stuck there, and so are your kids. And your kids are then stuck in those ghetto schools. I talk about financial independence, and I talk about passive income streams and investing and all that. I've had people write to me going, "Oh, you told me to invest and the stock market's crashed." Yeah, the stock market's volatile. Because the markets, when you went and bought a bag of apples today, that's the stock market. Because the markets are made up of the whole world exchanging goods. That's how value is regulated. They're volatile, and they have always recovered with a profit. So just chill. Don't look at your free trade every day unless you're going to buy some, which now is a good time. Don't look at it. Don't look at it every day and go, "Oh, I'm $7,000 down." You ain't lost anything until you sell them. And I always said this is a 5 or a 10-year thing, at least 5 years. So unless you're buying anymore, don't look at it. And I'll tell you what, if it goes through the roof and it's time to sell, and if you're still watching my channel, I'll tell you. But I've talked about investing and temperament so many times. If you haven't got the temperament for it, maybe get out. Because some people can't sleep at night because they think they've lost money. You haven't lost anything until you sell it. You still own X amounts of shares. You still own shares in this index. You've still got that equity. Anyway, I'm going all over the shop. If you are a fan of Toller and you were here to see him, potentially check out my streams. I try and stream once a day. I make videos as well, film reviews, all sorts of things. I've also got a Substack. I write true stories about my past degenerate life. Link in the description. There's 17 short stories in my Substack. They've had thousands of views. It's exceeded all my expectations. Substack is a cracking platform. There's no advertisers to keep happy, so there's virtually no censorship. Unless it's illegal, you can put it on Substack. So it's totally free. And if you sign up, you've only got to put your email in and press send. Any new ones I write, which is roughly 1 a month, will be sent straight to you. Good way of supporting my channel is to sign up to my Substack. I want to thank, let me sort out a tunage. I think it's only right that we go for something traditional since we had a guest on. But I'm sorry there was no Vart, but it's a bit rude when someone's talking to me just to go Vart. Raymond says, my son in Oz told me his investments come good, 6-figure, 75k. Yeah, it happens. Over 20 years, it's 100%. Historical charts say over 20 years, it's 100%. You will not fail. If 17 years ago you started putting 500 quid into your ISA every month, you would have 1.7 million now, tax-free. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. It's good stuff. And why don't we know this? Because they don't want us to know this. You go and talk to your rich friend. That one rich friend you've got who's, I've given the game away. That one rich friend you've got whose sister rides horses and all that. And, go and talk to them about index investments and ETFs. They're like, oh, yeah, I've been doing it since I was 16. I also do my sisters and my mums because they can't be bothered. So I've got 3 ISAs on the go, really. And you're like, oh, right. They're like, yeah, by the time I'm 35, I'll probably have about 6 million tax-free. And they're not joking. And it is that simple. And if you don't believe me, go online, type in index investing for beginners and have a little look down that rabbit hole. It's that easy. It really is. All right, people, I want to thank everyone who donated. Raymond, you absolutely kept the ball rolling with it tonight. Much appreciated. I want to thank Rags and Steve Craig for looking after the place. I want to thank everyone from Tolla's crowd who came over to give this stream a go. It'll be nice to see you again sometime. I want to thank the Scrubs for being so welcoming and kind to Tolla and talking and all being good, as you always are. And most of all, I want to thank myself. Most of all, I want to thank Tolla for coming on, because there's not a lot to gain from coming on here. Tell a lie, he gets a load of new excellent subscribers, some of the finest people in this digital space. Let's have some music. I will see you all tomorrow. We've got Semi-Agog, not next week. We've had to move it on. Not next week, the week after next. It'll be Wednesday, a week Wednesday. I've never known what that meant. Ta-ta! Oh, that hasn't happened.
All the world loves a lover. All the girls in every land are meant to know. The joy of loving is to live in the world of man. There's someone who's waiting for you. Soon the world will be yours for a time. Music starts to play, night will turn to day. Darkness disappears when the one you love is near. You're in man. All the world loves a lover. All the girls in every land are meant to know. Joy of loving is to live in the world of mankind. There's a place that is waiting for you. A world where the best in life is free, where time is always spring, happiness is king. The dreams you dream come true when the one you love loves you. You're in man. All the world loves a lover. All the girls in every land.
Cheers, Ted.
Joy of loving is to live in the world of mankind.
Hit it again. Whoa, I almost did it again. Wasn't that the funniest thing, the geezer, when he done the Mandom advert? Hey, you know what? That was really nice. I'm going to hit that again. Now, go on. Go and bugger off down your own end. I'll have a word with your mother about you and you'll get a clip round the ear. Hoita!